Not gonna lie to you guys, my pug is sitting here being like, "Oh my God, play with me. Oh my God, play with me. Oh my God, now's the time. Now's the time for energy. Play with me, play with me, play with me." Right? So, if and honestly, this today is going to be a little bit more scatterbrained, I think, generally. It's going to be very memey. I think there's lots of memes in today's offerings, right? We're going to be, but I think that that's fine. I think that we can use memes as a platform, as a springboard into something substantial, right? We're going to have a good time together with memes and such. And of course, my little pug, losing his little puggy mind. Who knows? Maybe he'll calm down right now. Maybe this will be the moment. Hey, Major, how to see you, bud? Good. How to see you? How to see you with my eyes? Good to see you, bud. Good to see you. Grinning. Good to see you too, bud. I assume you're out in the world working away, grinding, doing the grind set, as one does. I hope you're doing well, though, bud. Hope you're having a good day. Today was a great day for me. I finally got a really solid, nice sleep. Managed to clean my apartment. You know how difficult that can be, guys. Eric, good to see you, bud. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're healing. One of the things that doesn't get talked about at all, right? Doesn't get any talking about at all is how easy it is for your own personal space and your own personal life to fall into disrepair, right? I see it all the time, you know? That, like, I know for myself, I see it in my own life, right? I don't work on Wednesdays. Hey, day off. Hey, good for you, grinning. Good for you, grinning. But I'll be on the capitalist grind, right? Be on the, like, go to work, come home, get, like, an hour of, like, watch a show or something, go to sleep, wake up, go back to work, right? And what starts to happen? You know, what starts to happen? Your own space starts to degrade and starts to decline, right? Because it has to. You don't have the time. You don't have the time to, like, make food, do your dishes, do your laundry, like, keep everything in repair, right? And also maintain your sanity while you're all doing this kind of stuff, right? And then on top of that, you're trying to do things like working out, as Eric suggests, and all this kind of stuff. And so finally, when you get that day, right? When you get that day, and you clean everything up, right? You do your laundry, you do your dishes, right? You take out your garbage, you get your apartment cleaned up. It feels good. It feels really, really good, you know? And it's like one of those things, like, I think everybody does want to live in a clean space, and everybody wants to exist in this sort of clean environment, but we just can't. You know, you've got to make sacrifices. And you start asking, like, when do you take personal time for yourself? When do you actually get to, like, paint or do anything artistic? But fucking read a book, like, anything. Like, when do you actually get to do that? You know? Yeah, made a couple of gallons of curried lentils yesterday. Soup, tasty. I'm gonna do the same thing tomorrow. I've got all the ingredients ready to go to make a nice lentil stew, nice lentil soup. Pairs really nicely with potatoes or rice. Right? I'm looking forward to that. Past week, been doing the Insanity workout program, and I'm happy, able to start doing it again. Good for you, Eric, man. Good for you. I'm really rooting for you, bud. I'm really rooting for you. I know you've been on the long COVID train, right? You've been on the long COVID train, and you've been doing a lot of work recovering from that, you know? And that's one of the things that I think people really disrespect or simply don't know about COVID, is that there are people who just got completely it's not just like, oh, I got a little sniffle, right? Like, there are people who got completely totaled by it and had their lives completely flipped upside down in not just like I lost my job, but like losing your capacity to exist in the world in a healthy manner. That's crazy to think about, you know? And the number one thing that I keep encountering is because, like, I've been lax on my walk around videos for the YouTube channel. I'm going to try to get back on doing those because I think that they're effective and useful for driving traffic to this channel. I think that that's a big reason why my subscription base has kind of declined, is that I haven't been doing those particular videos. And so I'm going to try to get back on that. But I do also do short videos on TikTok. And the number one comment that I get on all of my videos is society doesn't owe you anything, which I have come to see as like one of the darkest expressions of like capitalist nihilism I've ever experienced. The idea that society doesn't owe you anything, right? Like my father's generation, like our grandparents' generation was always saying, we're trying to make life better for the next generation, right? What is that if not an expression of understanding that the society, in fact, does owe you something, right? That there's this very pernicious worldview that has infected the discourse that says the society, you are the one that needs to justify yourself to the society. That the structures that exist in the society are there and you have to justify yourself to them. I can't imagine a more demonic worldview than this, that says an evil empire exists and you have to justify your existence to the evil empire instead of the other way around. That the society certainly needs to justify its existence to you. If the society refuses to provide even access to bare necessities, forget about providing the bare necessities, but if it refuses to provide even the access to those bare necessities, then you don't need to pay. You're not obligated to pay any attention to that. You're not obligated to pay any attention to a society outside of its ability to commit violence to you, right? Which is exactly what we're in. Yeah, if society doesn't owe you anything, then you owe society nothing. Yeah, total lawlessness, which is what they're arguing for, right? Which is why it's this dark worldview. It's this incredibly nihilistic, incredibly hateful position. And what's so wild about it is that we could absolutely create a society that provides the bare necessities for everybody. We're a very wealthy society, and we absolutely can provide the bare necessities to our citizens and beyond. But we just choose not to. Why? Because we're evil. There's no other way to say it. Because we're choosing to enrich a small group of psychopaths. That's what's going on. Good to see you, Anemone. CR Strifey. Good to see you, bud. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well, CR Strifey. I don't know if I've seen you in the last little bit. Yeah, every time I bring up long COVID with strangers, they're completely clueless that something like that exists. Yeah, everybody has kind of just thrown up their hands on COVID and is sort of walking by. They're just kind of like, okay, COVID's over, let's go. I don't want to hear about it anymore, right? That seems to be how it's going. The coconut milk. Ooh, coconut milk in your. That's a good idea, man. That's a good idea. I might do that myself. I should run down to the corner store and get some coconut milk. $10 for 20 servings. Yeah, dude. Like now you're talking, right? Like I could, like one of the things that I keep buying, I have this gluten intolerance. It's not it's not a celiac thing. It's not so bad, but like I definitely don't want to eat a lot of gluten. And so I go and I buy gluten-free pasta, right? And I actually priced it out, and for the pasta and for the sauce, right? The whole meal ends up costing like $9, $10, right? Maybe a little bit cheaper than that. But, and to be fair, it's like 2 meals, so you end up spending. But I sort of think to myself, like, I could definitely eat cheaper than this. I could definitely do better than this. Yep, freeze half of it. Yep, always eat it within a month. Absolutely. Get a curry spice mix, then throw some coconut milk on it. Whatever dish you're making. I love it. Look, we should turn this into a cooking show. Huh? What do you guys think? One day you just tune in and I'm like at the stove being like, hey everybody, how you doing today? Today we're going to make ourselves some curried lentils. Hey. The city I was talking about is how Russia was attacking more. Report, is that what Russian is they're currently doing? And the city is Bakuma. Sorry, Eric, I didn't. Cooking with Communists. Mr. Moon nailing the name. Nailing the name. That's exactly correct. Communist cooking. Cooking with Communists. I think I like cooking with Communists a little bit better because it's just a little bit more homey. It sounds a little bit more wholesome, right? Hey everybody, welcome to Cooking with Communists. You can do the cooking. I love this idea, guys. We've hit it. We've done it. We've found the next level. We're elevating the discourse into the next thing. One of the things that I hope happens, it's been such a long time since someone's come into the chat being like, communism has failed every time it's been tried. And I gotta tell you, I'm kind of in the mood for that. I'm kind of in the mood for someone coming in the chat and being like, China is actually capitalist. Like I'm kind of hoping that happens soon, you know. But what can you do? What can you do? Yeah, communist cooking was where a neighborhood worked together for communal meals. It's like the story of Stone Soup. Do you guys know the story of Stone Soup? This homeless guy comes in to the town and says he's got a pot and a stone, and he says, we're all gonna make a stew, and everybody just needs to contribute one thing. My contribution is the stone, and he throws the stone in, and then some other guy says, well, I have a carrot. And another guy says, well, I have an onion. Well, I have some celery. I've got this. I've got that. And all the neighborhood comes together and they all throw their things in the pot. And then everybody gets a nice cup of stew, including the guy who put in the stone, right? Oh, you want to debate, John? Oh, here we go. CR Strifey. You're always up for it, bud. Before that, though, what I meant, Bakhmut is the city where Russian forces are currently trying to get as a result of the Ukraine offensive. Oh, you're saying that because of the Ukraine offensive, that Russia is pivoting and they're attempting to... The Russian counteroffensive is to get the city of Bakhmut. Yeah, probably. At this stage in the game, man, like it's so intricate what's going on now that it's difficult to report, right? It's difficult to report. There's one guy on Odyssey who I'll pay attention to because he does really good work in terms of collecting the daily kind of stuff, and then I'll show it to you guys. But like, Russia's losing the media war in the West. That's for sure the truth. But it's not losing the media war in the world, right? Like, you take a look at Chinese media or Indian media, and they know what's up. Like, they know what's up. They're not reporting on this like, Russia is, what a failure, right? They're not doing that. But, I mean, we knew that Russia was going to lose the media war here in the West. Like, if you scrub any media that actually attempts to report on what's happening, and if you refuse to talk to anybody who even has a neutral eye on what's going on in the crisis, right? Then, yeah, of course Russia's going to lose the media war, right? But that's okay, because Russia's winning the actual war, right? Like, that's the real truth of it, is that the West is going, rah, rah, we're the greatest, yeah, we can't lose, ha, 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 and then it's going to lose, like it always does, every single time, right? Because capitalists can't win wars. They don't know how to win wars. They don't actually understand what war is for and how to do it, you know? They certainly, like, they lose in Afghanistan, they're losing in Iraq, they lost the Vietnam War, they lose wherever they go, right? Because they're psychos. Like, they're going into these regions. Like, when they went into Vietnam, they literally go into Vietnam. They might as well have been launching an ideological crusade, right? That they needed to, quote-unquote, staunch the spread of communism. Well, how'd that work out, right? Did that work out for you? You really staunch the spread of communism, rather? All right, here we go. CR Strifey, let's go. I don't think a society can survive where people don't contribute and the expectation that everyone will be taken care of. I mean, I agree with that, but there's a, like, contribute to what, right? Contribute to what is what I would say. Because what we're what we're being asked to contribute to right now is this phony, fake, who gives a shit economy. It's like an anti-economy. That if you contribute, right, quote unquote contribute, like 9 times out of 10, what you're contributing to is something worthless. That's just inflating the pocketbook of a capitalist class that is like against the idea of helping the society, right? Whereas if we were like contributing to growing food, maintaining infrastructure, right, I think we would find that there wouldn't be all that much work to do. Like this is the thing that's so crazy about this society, is that we're so hell bent and hyper focused on work, grind set, put it in. You got to put in your time. If you're sleeping, you're not working and you're failing, right? You're falling behind and all that kind of stuff. But what we're working at is pointlessness, right? And if you actually were to sit down and be like, okay, what work is actually necessary to do? What is actually important to do? We would find out that there isn't actually that much work that would need to be done. And then on top of that, what's so embarrassing about our current system is that work that's so necessary to actually be done is the very work that we don't do right now. We're not maintaining our infrastructure. We're not building new infrastructure. We're not doing any of that kind of stuff, right? So our entire ethos, our entire worldview as people trapped in this kind of capitalist imperialist core is completely inverted. So I ostensibly and theoretically agree with this idea of everybody should contribute and everybody should be part of a society and contributes to the building of the society, but that's not what we're doing, right? That we're not actually building a society. We're not actually building a community. We're not actually building an infrastructure that supports human life. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. And so contributing to this, right? If the expectation is that everybody contributes to this society, then you're basically suicidal, right? You're basically just saying everybody should commit suicide and grind their life away into a suicidal pursuit, because that's what this structure is. Yeah, we are running in the oligarch's hamster wheel for sure, yeah. But ostensibly you and I agree on this point that people should contribute to the society to the degree that the society needs to be contributed to, right? That like if we're struggling to find people to work in farms, we should create a system that has citizens go and contribute work to farms. The Temporary Foreign Workers Program is a slave system. That it's the way slavers have solved this problem of, hey, we need seasonal workers, to me is completely abhorrence. Yeah, Keynes rather thought we'd be working 15-hour weeks. Exactly. Like, what's the point of building a structure of any sort in the society if it isn't to eventually reduce the amount of work that's expected for the society? And like right now, we're literally living in a society that's saying, if you don't work your entire life away, then you deserve to starve. Like, we should not contribute to that. Like, that's psychotic. And we should call it for what it is. And we should say to the people, like, I say fairly routinely to the people who defend that position that they have a mental illness. Because I do think it's a mental illness. I think they're suffering from a fairly serious mental illness. You're literally saying to people, your life should be harder. That you should suffer, and you should starve, and if you don't suffer and on behalf of a billionaire class that you should definitely simp for, then you're like, the whole argument I look at and I'm like, oh, you just have a mental illness. Like, that's like the ravings of somebody who's like literally trapped in a little box of their own making. Like, they need therapy. That's like what they need, because you can't argue with it. If somebody is like, you can't argue against a serial killer saying, I have the right to kill people. They're a serial killer. They think that they should walk around with a knife killing people. You can't reason with that, right? You just need to take them and put them in a box and tell them, okay, you can't be part of the society. Like, you're dangerous, right? And I view these people who are walking around saying society doesn't owe you anything exactly the same way. That they're dangerous people who are actively working to make life harder for everybody, to fulfill some kind of weird little delusion they have about what's going on in the world. I think it's a mental illness. Like I think it's very serious. I think it's a very, very serious problem. Let us unload on you capitalists. Yeah. This city's a major turning point in the Donbass region. Yeah, if Russia can get the entire Donbass region, like that's their war goals, right? This is one of the funny things about what's going on in this war, and what I call the Donbass war. Like, capitalists don't understand the concept of war goals, right? That for most of human history, war was fought with express war goals. That you would go into a region and be like, our goal is this. You would declare it, right? Your victory condition is this, right? You would get it, and that'd be it. You'd just be like, okay, we got it, we won, right? And the other side, most of the time, the other side would be like, you got it, okay. Well, now let's negotiate the terms of either the return of that or the terms of how we're going to move forward as a people, right? Because people don't want to live in a perpetual state of war, right? People want war to end and for some kind of peace to come in to play. Capitalists don't understand this concept. They don't understand the concept of war goals. So when they look at the Donbass war, right, they're confused by it. Because they're looking at, like, here's the territory that the Russians have, and they see that there's all this Ukrainian territory that the Russians haven't got, and so in their minds they think, oh, the Russians are losing. They have such a small amount of territory. Failing to recognize that the Russians have declared what their war goals are, and if they get the rest of the Donbass region, then that's it. They've got it. They did it, right? Because that's their war goals. Like, their war goals is to secure the Donbass region, and right now they've got about half of it. Right? And if they secure this city, exactly as you're pointing out, Eric, well, and they may very well do so because the Ukrainians are doing all these counteroffensive along other sides of the border. The Russians are losing tiny bits of territory in places they don't really care about. And that might mean that they're just going to spearhead into a region that's actually serious for them claiming their war goals. And the reason they've been able to do this is because capitalists don't understand how war works. And they don't understand the concept of war goals, and they don't understand victory conditions. You can see this with, like, the Iraq War. There were no victory conditions that were ever claimed. It literally was just like, we're going to go in there. We're going to go in there and spread democracy. We're going to go in there and get rid of Saddam Hussein and weapons of mass destruction, right? Spread liberty and democracy. Those aren't war goals. That's not a goal, right? And so what it means for your people, if you're the offender, right, if you're the aggressor, is that there's never actually a moment of catharsis, or there's never actually a moment where the citizenry or the people actually get to stand up and say, okay, we did it. War goal achieved. We got it. We did it. Right? So, like, we're just stuck as capitalists, we're just stuck in this perpetual state of warfare. And what that means is that you will inevitably lose. Right? It's not possible to just claim a territory and perpetually have it forever. Right? It's just not possible. And eventually, just like what happened in Afghanistan, you have to withdraw, right? And when you withdraw, the rest of the world goes, oh, you lost. And the reason why you lost is because you never stated any war goals in the first place, right? So Russia's doing it right. They've stated very clear war goals. There are some that are a bit more abstract, like the demilitarization and the denazification of Ukraine are fairly abstract. But the claiming of the Donbass region is not abstract. Like, that's a very clear goal that you can very much be like, yeah, we got it. Like, we won. What are you going to do? Right? And they are going to get it. Like, it is just a matter of time. And the Americans are doing everything they can to lengthen the process out. Even though it's costing them everything to do it, right? But at what cost? CR Strivey, that's a cultural problem. Personally, I feel that people want to be part of something bigger than themselves and will happily contribute to social efforts. Happens all the time right now. You don't need a stick to get people to contribute. I think that's right. You can take a look. Like, ask yourself a serious question, right? How the hell did these pyramids get built? How the hell did they build the Sphinx? How the hell did they actually do any of that kind of stuff, right? And the childish answer is slavery. Right? That they enslaved people and all this kind of stuff. But you're never going to get, like, those kinds of projects done through a slave system. Like to maintain the level of slave labor that you would need to actually do to actually get that done, it itself is already so over the top that to then say you're also going to do this other project, it's just not going to work that way, right? That something like building a pyramid clearly captures the imagination of the populace. It clearly comes and there's something creative and imaginative that people really throw their weight behind and really think to themselves, that's something worthwhile. There's something interesting about that, about building a structure that aligns with the stars, that gives us an opportunity to communicate forever down the line, for as long as this pyramid stands. The idea that we knew this kind of mathematics. We understood that there was a curvature of the earth. We understood that there were certain types of measurements. We understood high math. We understood these things, and we can show future generations forever what we understood as a people through our building efforts. I think that there's something like absolutely true about the idea that if you have a populace that is idle, let's say, they're not going to just fall into absurdity, right? They're going to get caught up in cultural ideas, and they're going to get caught up in building stuff and doing stuff and focusing collectively to achieve collective goals for the society, right? Like the space race. To me, the space race is very much indicative of this, where that the idea of a man getting on the moon just like captures the imagination of the people and captures the imagination of the society. And all of this gets steadily dismantled because what we're focusing on now, right, the project of the people now is to enrich a group of losers who are, and we all know it's going to amount to nothing, right? We all know that it's going to amount to nothing, that it's all just going to blow away in the wind, that all of the wealth of Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and all of that kind of stuff, and all of the wealth of people like Donald Trump and Joe Biden, right? In a single generation, all of that is just going to blow away into the dust, and the pyramids will still stand. And we know that's how it is. Like, we know intrinsically that what we're doing is pointless. And that's why there's such a heavy amount of nihilism in the society now, because what we are doing is by definition pointless. We're just enriching a group of losers who obviously don't care about anything. They themselves are like the most nihilistic people you can find. And just grifting us, just grifting everybody around them. They're not interested in building anything. They're not interested in creating anything or contributing anything, right? The society that they're in charge of is degrading underneath their feet, and all they can talk about is war. Like, it's over. It's totally over. And so we're not going to contribute to that, right? Yeah, the Duran, New Atlas, Scott Ritter, awesome sources know what's happening in regards to the Ukraine war. Also, the History Legend channel is another good one, but some of his other stuff is garbage. Yeah. Delves into actual history where he tries to counter woke arguments. Yeah, once you get into kind of the woke kind of conversation, I tend to tune out. I feel like people who engage in sort of the quote-unquote woke conversation are more or less missing the forest for the trees. It seems hard for disabled people to contribute in the current setup. Of course it is, right? Of course it is, by design. That's on purpose, right? Like and now we're telling disabled people, like, just get a job, and it's like, well, that doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. I have to say that after the insanity workout, pretty much done for a while, it's extremely taxing on my endurance, but I love it. As long as you're loving it, Eric, that's what matters, right? When I think about the argument about those who don't contribute to the society shouldn't be taken care of, how do you constitute what is contribution? Yeah, what about people who are disabled? Well, and like, that's a really good question. What is contribution? In capitalist society, raising a child is not, you're not rewarded for it. There's no financial reward for raising a child, right? If you do community service or volunteer for something, there's no financial reward for it, and yet people do it anyway, right? So like this idea that the only type of work or contribution that should be considered a contribution is whatever a capitalist will pay for, it's destroying us, right? It's absolutely destroying us. And like, and the results of it are obvious, right? We're not having kids anymore. Like, you don't need to go any farther than that. Like, you don't need to create any larger argument than like the society has stopped having children. We intrinsically know that the society has become so dangerous and so unfulfilling and so incapable of providing the basics of life for the citizenry that we naturally have simply stopped having children, right? Like, there's no larger failure than this. You can't point at any, there's a million things to point to, but pointing at this, like, people just aren't having children. Yeah, like, the society is anti-life. The society is anti-life. We're literally living in a society where it's so bad for the mass of the people that the mass of the people are simply no longer having children. And that by itself is going to collapse Western civilization. We're simply not going to be able to compete with cultures that are actually building a society, right? Like, literally China is having to like actually like mitigate and actually be like, okay, you can only have so many kids. And we're actually like, they're having to do like social engineering on that level because the people want to have so many fucking kids, right? Compare that to us. We simply can't have them. They're too unaffordable. It's too dangerous. The society has become far too dangerous. And so we're just living in this like godless hellscape. And yet people still simp for it. People still defend it. It's unbelievable to me. Working less would also be good for the climate. Yeah, we know that's true. We know that's true. Emissions went down naturally went during the COVID period, right? We all stayed home, right? Nobody was like, everybody was slowing down. Everything was slowed down, and emissions went down. You want to cut emissions, right? Tell everybody to stay home. Tell these capitalists to fuck off. Like, very simply, like, tell these capitalists to fuck off. Tell people like O'Leary to shut their mouths. Like, just get the fuck over here. Yeah, John is a shill. It was aliens. You're right, dude. Ancient aliens built the pyramids. You're absolutely right, dude. It can't be brown people, right? Oh, brown people? That doesn't seem right. No, it had to be aliens. How can you tell that white supremacy is deeply, deeply ingrained in our ethos, right? It's like, brown people or aliens? Gotta be aliens. The crux of the problem is limiting self-interest and encouraging contentment. Enough is never enough, but that's what consumerism and capitalism encourages. Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's a dead end, right? It's a total dead end. Read the book of Ecclesiastes, right? The book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible talks all about this. That's how you know that the people who are professing the Bible right now have no idea what's going on. Like, they don't read it. And you can tell that they don't read it because the book of Ecclesiastes itself is essentially an anti-consumerist document. That, like, you flip it open, you give it a cursory glance, and it's literally like the person who's considered the wisest person who ever lived saying, yeah, the pursuit of consumption and glory and valor and all this is just wind. It's just blowing in the wind. It's nothing. The only thing that matters is finding peace in your work, is finding happiness in your work. That's it. That's the only thing that has value. Right? It's something that I personally take to heart, right? As much as I bitch about having to go do the capitalist work, when I go to do it, I find my peace in it, right? I take a look at it and I say, okay, what value am I contributing? How am I helping people, right? What am I doing that can actually make things better for people in this moment during this time, right? And I really see, like, because my position in all of it is that I'm the face man, right? I stand in front of people. I quote unquote work the cash, right? One of the most denigrated positions in the society, working the cash. Anybody can do that. Yeah, right. Go do it. Go fucking stand at the cash and actually do cash, right? And pretend as though anybody can do it, right? Because there's a graciousness that comes along with it. You've got to be graceful, and you've got to expect, because you're experiencing a torrent of humanity, right? You're just being bombarded by humanity, and no one wants to do it, right? All of the people that I work with, when I show up, they're like, oh, thank God this guy is here. This guy wants to do this. I'm just going to put my head down and work the lattes and like do that kind of stuff, right? That's fine. My interaction with the public will basically be like giving them their shit. That's it. But whereas when I stand at the till, I go, okay, here we go. Here's an aspect of humanity, another aspect of myself that is coming, and I'm going to try to make their experience for the very brief period of time that we're with one another to be as nice as possible, right? Because that's what everybody should always be doing, right? Can you imagine if we were living in a society where every single time you talk to somebody, every time the person you were talking to was trying to make this interaction as pleasant as possible for everybody involved, right? It's not easy to do. There's lots of people who you encounter who are trying to be as miserable as they possibly can be, who are reveling in their misery, right? And this childish idea that like, oh, anybody can do that. No, you can't. I challenge you. I challenge you, doctors, lawyers, engineers, all you guys. I challenge you. Go do it. Try. See how long you'll put up with it, right? No, you can't. Because it takes a robustness, right? It takes a psychological certainty, right? A spiritual centeredness to do that kind of a work and to not let it burn you out. Oh, but anybody can do it. Oh, anybody can do it. It's like the equivalent of watching a guy juggle 5 balls and having somebody say, oh, I could do that if I wanted to. Okay, bud. I feel kind of bad about it, though, because I'm at the HR and head office types. Oh, what are you saying here? I'm losing... Oh, Generation Y me. How you doing, bud? I'm losing my benefits because I haven't worked enough to be considered full-time this year. Fucking shit, eh? They're fucking stupid little rules. And, of course, the capitalists are doing it to you on purpose, right? They're giving you just the right amount of hours, right? They literally, I have done this kind of work before. That's exactly what they do. That they put a spreadsheet out and they say... okay, we got to make sure that if a person needs to work 360 hours or however many hours it is, we got to make sure they work 359, right? And they spreadsheet it out and they do it on purpose. Absolutely 100%. Do not fuck around. Do not pretend like they're doing anything else, right? Yeah, I told a manager this place is ran by demons, yeah. I feel kind of bad about it, though, because I'm at the HR and head office types. Yeah, I mean, it's... Here's the hard reality, right? This is the much harder pill to realize. Is that we want to demonize people. We want to take the HR people, and we want to take the CEOs, and we want to take all these people, and we want to treat them like demons. I'm as guilty as it is anybody, right? Like I call these people psychopaths all the time, right? I'm as guilty as anybody, right? But I've got to admit, and I constantly have to remind myself that what we're really angry about is the structure of the system itself, right? That the system is structured this way. Right? It's built this way. So it doesn't matter if everybody is angels, right? You could have the nicest people in the world running this system. And because the system itself is evil, because the system itself is antagonistic, you're always going to have these results. You're always going to have this, right? Because it's to the benefit of the system to fuck you over, right? And this is something, as I've been, it's especially as I've been talking to the TikTok types, right? Been talking to these TikTok people. And it really makes me realize, like, oh, like, I'm getting too comfortable with you guys, right? Like, you guys have kind of a foundation. That someone like Watson will come in, although I haven't seen Watson in some time. I hope you're doing well, Watson. But someone like Watson will come in, and Watson is really well read and, like, I think knows more about the subject than even I do, for sure. So you guys have kind of a foundation of understanding of how communism operates and how we think about the idea of communism. And I keep encountering these people who are just like nothing, 0%, like absolutely 0% understanding, down to the level where they refuse to even acknowledge that there is an antagonistic structure in the society, right? It makes it incredibly difficult to have rational conversations with people if they refuse to acknowledge that there are owners and owned, and that those are classes that are by their nature antagonistic to one another. That if the ownership class benefits, it's at the expense of the working of the working class, right? And if the working class benefits, it's at the expense of the ownership class. And so there's this constant antagonism that we're attempting to ameliorate. But how do you ameliorate something if you refuse to acknowledge the existence of the structure? Like, I'm literally having conversations with people who are saying that capitalism allows everybody to operate freely and fairly 100%. It's like, oh, so you're delusional. Like, you're living in a total delusional space where you don't acknowledge the existence of the class structure. You don't acknowledge the natural antagonism that goes between it, right? And so you can't have these rational conversations about how to ameliorate this. And if you start to actually talk, and what happens to these people, it's crazy. When they actually start to get to the point where they begin to have a glimmering of understanding of that, they immediately are trained by the system to just go, that's communism, and communism always fails. That's it. Their brain is shut off. They're not living in the world. They're living in a fantasy world. And it's kind of weird and odd, frankly. Like, it's weird that there are people walking around like this. But that's what we're doing. We're just constantly trying to break through to these people. But at a later date, they can become productive once their material conditions are met. Yeah. That's terrible and intentional, of course. I've been in that situation as well. I used to work at Cracker Barrel, and they would just try to give you 23 hours so you'd lose insurance. Of course. That's it. And don't fool yourselves. It's intentional. It's not an oversight. Like, they're doing that on purpose. Yep, capitalist war goals, more war. Yep, number one war goal, make money. Yep. Are you recovering from your long COVID? People are curious about your long COVID, Eric. Are you recovering? He who does not work, neither shall he eat. Can you explain this Vladimir Lenin line? It makes me nervous as a... This is a line that gets decontextualized a lot by capitalist apologists who pretend as though who Vladimir Lenin was talking about were disabled people and weak people, right? Lenin was explicitly talking about capitalists, right? He was talking about capitalists when he said that, right? So who does not work? Capitalists don't work. They pretend like they work, right? But like people like Kevin O'Leary pretend like they work hard, but they don't, right? Sitting around and deciding where to put your money isn't hard work. It's not work, right? You're not making anything. You're not creating anything. You're not doing any service. You're literally just like a prince sitting in Shark Tank, making fun of children when they come in with their ideas, right? Trying to find ways to scam people out of their money. Like that's basically what he does for his job, if you want to call it that, right? It's not work. And the truth is that most capitalists don't actually personally do that, right? I think that Shark Tank is one of the oddest things that has occurred from our society, right? That here are these billionaires and multimillionaires sitting around pretending like what they're doing is important, when the reality is that they could hire people to do this for them, and many do. The best ones, the smartest ones, do. Right? David Thompson isn't personally standing there looking at his portfolio, tinkering with all that kind of stuff. Like, maybe he does, but he certainly has hired advisors and people to run this shit for him. Certainly. Why wouldn't you? Of course you would do that, right? It's not that expensive to do if you have billions of dollars, right? And so, of course, he has, like, people who are operating and doing this stuff for you. But it's not work, right? And so Lenin is standing there saying, he who does not work, neither shall he eat. He's talking about capitalists. He's not talking about disabled people. He's not talking about people who are injured or are in that kind of position. So when capitalists take this line and put it forward, they're doing the thing they always do, right? They're decontextualizing something and then universalizing it, right? You can see that when people talk about the Bible all the time. So I'm used to it by now, right? People will do this with the Bible and with Scripture all the time. They'll decontextualize something that gets said, and then universalize it, right? So Christ says, "I come not to bring peace, but the sword," right? So what does he mean by that? Well, he's explicitly saying that, like, what we are doing here is going to lead to conflict. Because we are in an empire, and the empire isn't going to just let us peacefully do this. They're going to fight us, right? And so we have to pick up the sword and defend ourselves. That's what he's saying. But as long as you decontextualize it, you just remove it from that context that it was within, right? And then universalize it. You can say that, oh, Christ wants us to pick up the sword and go kill Muslims. Like, so I'm used to this shit. And you see it all the time. You see it all the time. Like, Lenin wasn't saying, let's purge the society of disabled people. Like, what a fascist reading by fascists in order to support their own fascism, right? He was saying capitalists don't work, so they shouldn't eat. Yeah, they screw us every time they can, but hey, I got a $25 gift card after being there for 5 years, so there's that. Hey, don't spend that all in one place. $25 gift card. Wow. Jesus Christ, dude. What a respectful thing. The one thing I didn't realize is that the Kharkiv region is actually not part of the Donbass region. Yeah. Video by the end of this week. Oh my god. I'm also making a video both English and French. Good for you, bud. Good for you, bud. Rusty Shackerford. Wow, I fucked that up. Rusty Shackelford. I'm going to change the picture. We've been looking at this picture for a long time. Yeah, Walmart is notorious about it. They would even do things like make you work 5 hours, 45 minutes. Yep, they don't give you a lunch break. They also do things like make you work 6 hours, 45 minutes. Yeah, exactly. Totally. Well, and what's really fascinating, I've talked to lawyers about this, right? I've talked to labor lawyers about this kind of stuff. And people who fought in order to get certain legislation in place, right? And it's amazing how often these guys are like, yeah, we simply didn't expect big corporations to act this way. We didn't. We would say like, okay, we're mandating that you've got to get, if you work for 6 hours, that means that you have to get a half-hour break, and we just didn't expect the reaction to be, oh, okay, well then they work 5 hours and 45 minutes, right? Like the naivety amongst even those who are fighting against the death cult is pretty astounding. It's pretty astounding that like, and naivety is exactly the word. That like they'll literally fight for years in order to get a piece of legislation through, and then the cult will just be like, oh, then we'll just move it so it's 5 hours and 45 minutes, and the lawyers will just be like, oh about it. It's like there's no understanding whatsoever that they're negotiating with people who have no moral compass, who are psychos, right? Like the system itself is psychopathic. And it will always result in psychopathic behavior. And as long as we continue to pretend like what we should do is negotiate, right? This is why I constantly say, like, we have to cease the negotiation. We have to tell these people where their position is, and their position is beneath the working class, not above it. That's the truth. That if you're going to just sit there and act and get money for nothing, right? Then you don't get to decide things. You don't get to decide how things operate. You certainly aren't going to be the primary beneficiary, right? Like this manic idea that we have in our society where the capitalist class is something to be negotiated with, right? No, it isn't. No, it isn't. That the end game for us is looking at the capitalists and saying, this is the way it is. And then when they talk back, we take our hand and push them into a hole and cover the hole with dirt. Like, that's literally the end game. That we are operating in a way to just show the capitalists the grave and saying to them, this is how the society operates now. And then when they cry like babies about it, we go, oh, isn't that cute? And then ignore them. Like, that's what the dictatorship of the proletariat is all about. That fundamentally, like, I don't know why anyone takes any capitalist seriously ever, outside of the amount of violence that they can perpetuate on the society. That when capitalists stand up, they are babies that are crying. And exclusively. Like, there is no capitalist that can stand up and say anything valuable. They're not mentally capable of it. Because their position is so detached from reality. And so detached from anything. Like, there's this meme going around right now where it's King Charles, right? And he's telling people to move stuff for him. And he's, like, ordering his servants around, right? In this very, very, like, arrogant way. And people are reacting to this very, in an appropriate way, if you ask me, pointing out the arrogance of the royal family and all of this. And I'm just like, yeah, why are we listening to these people, right? They're detached from reality. They don't even know how to treat people properly, you know? Communism? But what about my freedoms? I have the freedom to sell myself into slavery. That's the libertarian position. Oh, interesting. The principle was enunciated in the Russian Constitution of 1918. It was also Article 12 of the 1936 Soviet Constitution. In the USSR, work is a duty and a matter of honor for every able-bodied citizen. In accordance with the principle, he who does not work, neither shall he eat. Absolutely, Major. Absolutely. And capitalists, apologists, will always say that, like, in the Soviet Union, you were forced to work, right? And there were fines and all this. It's like, no, that the Constitution made it so that you always had a job, right? That you would, if the private sector wouldn't provide a job, then the public sector would, right? And I'm of the opinion that that has negative consequences all by itself, because there is such a thing as no more work, right? There is such a thing as that. And that's something that capitalists and rulers generally, like, that's not just a capitalist phenomenon, it is just like a rulers generally never want to admit that there is such a thing. There is such a thing as just no more work, right? Sometimes the work just ends. And that's just the truth, you know? There just comes a moment where the work is over. And you're like, okay, well, now what? Well, just fucking chill out. Just fucking chill out. Like, why has it got to be anything bigger than that? Communism is a temporary setback on the road to freedom, liberty, prime. Yeah. If you believe that freedom is the right to sell yourself into slavery, then I would imagine that you would say that communism is a temporary setback to that. They are sharks because they feed on others, yet the labor of others. At least they are oddly honest in the title. Yeah. Nothing to be proud of being called a shark, yeah. Oh, good, thanks, John. Phew. I get to eat. That's a plus. Yeah, I understand now. Well, I mean, yeah, like, like, people who are disabled have the right to live. I think this is one of the things that I think people get shocked by about learning. Like, I was actually taken aback by in monarchical Europe, right? Like, we consider the monarchy to be these hard-nosed, like it's so bad living under a monarchy because the monarchs get to say what they want. Well, disabled people, right? Specifically people who have mental illnesses. So physical disabilities was actually different. Like, it was fairly cruel and mean for people with physical disabilities. But if you had a mental disability, people considered that you were the quote is touched by God. Like, literally, you are spawned into this reality, and you kind of have the mental capacity of a child, right? And so the society's response to this wasn't, what a worthless, layabout, useless eater, right? The response was, oh, God has given us a different type of person who views the world in a different way, right? And this is why, so the position of the court jester, right, was often filled by people such as this. That the court jester position would be these touched by God individuals who had a diminished, but just a different way of looking at the world. They had this kind of childlike sort of quality about them. And we have these times on the record. And so you have these people in the king's court, right, who had this kind of position where you would have courtiers and all this kind of stuff communicating with the king, right? But there was this big elephant in the room that nobody was pointing to. We're all familiar with this, right? And the jester would just, like, point it out and be like, but wait, what about this? This is happening. And he wasn't doing it to be like, haha, get fucked. He was doing it because there it is. And it's obvious to anybody that even the jester can see that it's the truth. That's why it's considered so malicious when the king goes after the jester, because the jester is usually this person who is quote unquote touched by God. So if you go after the jester, you're committing a sin against God himself, right? In the medieval world. And so in many ways we're much more cruel than even medieval Europe, which is true in so many other ways. Like, we work more than medieval peasants do. Like, medieval peasants got more time off than we did. Right? By many accounts, they end up getting more benefits than we do, right? To the degree that they have access to the technologies that are capable. But, like, we're like, we've declined in serious ways in this society, but we don't think we have because we have all this technology. We've got these glittering lights. But like, can you imagine being a medieval serf and showing up and seeing all this technology and being like, oh wow, so you guys must only be working like this small amount of time, and only to find out that like, oh, you guys are working more than I do. Fuck. Oh, round 2 with COVID for CR Strifey. No lingering symptoms. Oh my god. That's tough, man. That's tough. Oh, picked up smoking again recently. Yeah, I used to really judge people for smoking. I used to judge people really hard for smoking. I would always say, you're losing years on your life. And then I worked in funeral services for a year, and I saw what those years looked like. And now I go, I don't say fucking anything to smokers. You smoke away. You're not losing anything. You're really like everything past 90. You can sacrifice that. If you want to take those years and put them in a cigarette and smoke them away, you go right ahead. Compton, how you doing, Compton? You were correct about the rightward shift in pop culture. Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. I'm absolutely right about that. You watch. It's going to get explicit. And it's going to happen a lot faster than you think it's going to happen. Right? It's going to happen a lot faster than you think it's going to happen. That right now, Disney has set up its political propaganda apparatus, right? And right now, its political propaganda apparatus is set up to facilitate the quote-unquote left-wing diversity, what's traditionally thought of as the woke crowd, right? That manifests itself most obviously in the Disney, in the new Little Mermaid, right? If you guys don't know, the new Little Mermaid is black, right? The new Little Mermaid. And this is something I actually wanted to talk about today, right? The new Little Mermaid being black, which I have to say, as somebody who is like a Disney kid, right? As somebody who keeps my finger on the pulse of this, I actually really love this decision. I think that this is a great decision for Disney. Not just for Disney, but also just for storytelling in general. But it is worth pointing out, right, that there's this other narrative that's coming up that I think is absolutely true, right? You see, John, by designing the movie to make chuds mad, we get free advertising. Not only that, but any actual legitimate criticism becomes a controversial topic by association. It's ingenious. We don't have to try to make good movies. By the way, get back to work on the CGI. I better not catch you trying to start a union. Right? All of that plays. Even with all of that, so the question becomes, does making The Little Mermaid black maintain the credibility of the story? Right? Is it serving the story, or is it just a cynical ploy? Right? And my view is that it's actually both in this particular instance. Right? That it is actually both. That Disney and other storytellers are using diversity politics as a propaganda tool in order to do exactly this, right? You don't actually have to tell good stories. And if somebody stands up and says your story sucks, you can just say, "Oh, you're just a diversity. You're against diversity, and what and you're one of these internet chuds," right? You don't actually have to tell a good story. And if somebody critiques your story, you can just deflect it with identity politics, right? Like I say, they always do all of the fucking time. And so, and you can see this in most Disney movies and most projects at this point. This is an interesting one though, because this is bold. Like this is bold, right? This isn't just like having the Little Mermaid and then there's like a side character who is a diverse change, right? This is a much stronger position. And it's because of its boldness and the strength of the decision that I think it actually does play, and it may actually go beyond the political propaganda and actually become art again, right? Like, I am ostensibly in favor of diverse swaps and gender swaps and all that kind of stuff. When I was in university, we did that all the time. We were constantly gender swapping and doing all that kind of stuff just to see, just to experiment, and to fundamentally ask the question: does this change the story? Is the story still intact if we do this? Like, what changes in the society, right? And what changes in the story if we do this? And I think the power of making Ariel black, and ostensibly you have to think that Triton and all the rest of them are also going to be black, right? And I think the power of it is going to be that the story's not going to change, right? That the fundamental structure of the story of The Little Mermaid is going to remain intact, and that we are going to see The Little Mermaid told in a very straightforward way. This is my hope, because they could still fuck the story up, right? They could still fuck the story up, and they could still make it like, you go girl boss, Ariel's completely flawless, everything she does is brilliant and genius, she does not go on the hero's journey, she doesn't struggle at all, and everything's completely fine. The way they did with Rey, right? Whereas if they just tell the story and they just go, okay, Ariel's black, Triton's black, the rest of everybody's black, here's the story, I think the strength of the piece is going to be seeing how it's the same, and seeing that, like, oh, it didn't actually matter. For all of the complaining and all of the whining and all of the whinging and all of the extravagance and all the woke agenda and all that kind of stuff, that at the end of the day the story stands, right? Because that's why I think the people who are quote unquote anti-woke and anti-diversity in these movies, that's where they get it right. Is that they're correct when they say, like, the female Ghostbusters movie is exactly this. That, like, I say it was a fun movie and all that, but it wasn't a good movie. Like, it was worthy of critique, right? And it absolutely was the studio using diversity politics in order to deflect away from the fact that their movie sucked, right? And to generate advertising for the movie, right? But the story itself blew. And so that's when it's correct to say, look, this is being cynically done, and we can see it's being cynically done. But there is an opportunity here. And I feel like The Little Mermaid might actually do it, right? Might actually cross the Rubicon of, like, actually attempting to use diversity swapping or racial swapping in this particular case for a positive reason. And that reason can very much be, well, look how much it didn't matter. Look how much the story stayed the same. Look how much you're still in love with Ariel. Look how powerful Triton still is. Look at how scary Ursula still is. Look at how charming Eric still is. Look at how you still sympathized with the characters, and look at how everything was a good story, well told, and look at how much you looked at the character of Ariel and you didn't see a black woman, you saw a woman who was in love. Like, that's what matters to me, right? Because art has the power of changing people's opinions. That's the power of art. That's why the capitalists work so hard to destroy artists. Because they know that art is the primary tool by which capitalism is fought against. Right? They know that they can't support artists, that they have to destroy artists wherever they go. Because if artists actually are permitted to exist in the society, then you're going to end up with a very strong anti-capitalist movement. By the natural course of how things go. This is commonly understood throughout the history of Western civilization. William Shakespeare doesn't stop writing in the theater because he gets tired of it, or he gets old, or he dies. He stops writing because they banned the theater. And they banned the theater because people started to express anti-monarchical feelings from it, right? And you can't have that. You fucking can't have that. And how do I feel about Lenin and Stalin, both against art? I think that their reasoning is the same as all ruling class leaders. It's very natural for the ruling class to be against artists and artistry, because you can end up with artists that gain power through their art. It has happened, and it does happen. Where an art like was it Carl Polanyi? There's this fellow who wrote a book called The Power of the Powerless. He was a theater director. Literally, he was a theater director. And he wrote a book called The Power of the Powerless, right? He becomes elected the president. Like, art has extreme power. And if you are Lenin and Stalin trying to foment a revolution, right? Trying to organize a revolution, the very fucking last thing you need is a bunch of artists creating an artistic movement, right? Yeah, Zelensky was a comedian on a TV show, becomes the president. That's a great example, right? Reagan was an actor, becomes the president, right? There is extreme power in art. It's why I talk about art on this thing, because you've got to. You've got to talk about culture, you've got to talk about art, and if you're not talking about culture, you're not talking about art, you're probably not talking politics, right? And do I agree with Lenin and Stalin's position? No. I think that art should be free and should be done, and you should be supporting artists, and you should be supporting art. But at the same time, Lenin and Stalin were basically at war, right? So tough to you can have like a philosophical disagreement while also understand that reality asserts itself, right? And if you let free artists exist in your society, well, you're just basically begging the U.S. empire to just foment a color revolution in your borders through an artistic process, right? That's what you're begging for, and I think it's just easier for leaders, especially revolutionary leaders, to just be like, no, fuck off, right? It's pretty common, in fact. If mermaids did exist, I don't think they'd be black or white. Yeah, I think they'd have blue shiny scales and gills. That's the other part of it, CR Strifey. Like, people are losing their fucking mind because Ariel's black, and I'm like, yeah, because mermaids exist in the first fucking place, you dumbasses. Like, you could make Ariel whatever you wanted, right? Why not? Why not? And I gotta tell you, the number one reason why I'm looking at this and being like, you know, finally, maybe actually some kind of actual art is going to come out of this kind of diversity thing, and the diversity thing is because it's not a side character. It's not just a tacked on thing. It's not, oh, Gaston, by the way, is gay, right? It's not like a tacked on, cynical, just sort of a nod in the direction, right? It's not pandering. I think that's the thing. It's not pandering. So much of this diversity woke kind of thing is pandering. Where they're just trying to be like, oh, look, this, oh, we're doing this over here with this. Don't you like that? This community, right? This is much stronger. This is taking like an established IP, something like The Little Mermaid, which The Little Mermaid, by the way, in Disney like lore and in the history of Disney, is probably one of their most important films ever. The Little Mermaid was the moment when Disney went, oh, we can actually do animated features again. Right? That before Little Mermaid, they did Oliver and Company, and Oliver and Company did fairly well, right? And enough for them to commit to another animated feature, and the animated feature that came after Oliver and Company was The Little Mermaid. And The Little Mermaid was the moment when Disney went, oh fuck, this is serious. Like, we can actually do this and tell really strong stories. And that kicked off what I consider to be the golden age of Disney. Like, if you look back at Disney's history, right, it's impossible to deny that the films between like The Little Mermaid and I think you could say that the ending of that golden era was probably like Hunchback of Notre Dame or Tarzan, like in that little moment. But those films throughout the 90s, you had The Little Mermaid, you had Aladdin, you had The Lion King, right, Beauty and the Beast. Like, this is the golden era of Disney. And I don't think you can debate it, right? They just powerhouse movies, critically acclaimed, enormously famous, enormously popular, world-renowned, right? Absolute golden age shit, and they're taking the film that kicked it all off, and they're doing this. It's an extremely bold decision. It's an extremely bold decision, right? To take the main character, the main family, and do this kind of race swap. I think it's actually really, 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 really brilliant, and actually has credibility. It gives credibility to the project. Yeah, we're talking The Little Mermaid. And Ligandese, but if you're going to tune in with a bunch of critiques and all that kind of stuff, man, I'm going to beg for you to go back maybe about a half hour and come back in. Because it's a complex subject that has a lot of complexity to it. But I think it's actually, like, my conclusion, if you want the too long didn't read, is to say that for all of Disney's dickering and all of its cynicism surrounding the diverse woke agenda, right, which I think is real, right? I think here is a moment when they've actually said, no, we've got to actually do something that has credibility, right? Because everything they've done before this, I don't think has credibility, right? It's just, as I said, it's just pandering. Anyway, I'm going in a circle. So I'm going to move on. Actually, this misconception about Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky being the driving force for the revolution, they essentially hijacked the revolution that was already happening in Russia during the World War I. Revolution and Ideology is a good episode to explain that period of time. I mean, you can't really hijack a revolution. Like, they end up being the people who end up at the top of the chain. And you don't just end up that way. Like, you just don't. Like, they position themselves to be there, right? And you can call that hijacking if you like, but, like, Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky were key instrumental figures. And I understand that there are people who think otherwise, but, sorry, man, like, you don't end up at the top of the food chain for nothing, right? You don't just walk in and go like, oh, there's the revolution happening, I'm your leader. Like, it doesn't happen that way. It doesn't work that way. Like, Lenin is absolutely a figure who was involved in fomenting the revolution and absolutely involved in the process of it. And this idea that, like, these guys are just, like, opportunistically hijacking the movement, I just don't think that that's very serious. Like, not really. Like, I think it's just a narrative that comes out to discredit the people who were seen as the leaders, right? Like, Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky are leaders of this stuff. Absolutely they are. Like, absolutely they are. You don't, and you can sort of create this argument that says, like, oh, there was just a lot of discontent and there were people, like, Lenin said, like, maybe there'll be a revolution in a decade, and then 2 weeks later, the revolution is upon him, right? So it is this idea that, like, even the revolutionaries, even the people who are pushing for revolution, don't know when the revolution is coming, right? I see this all the time in whenever I talk to people. Like, you talk to the central organizers of the Occupy movement, right? The people who are at the heart of the Occupy movement. They didn't know it was going to happen, right? To them, this was just another attempt to protest. This was just another protest. This was just another thing. They were just doing yet another thing. And then all of a sudden, there's thousands of people in Zuccotti Park. And you ask them, like, hey, did you see this coming? And all of them were like, no. Like, obviously not. And so are they hijacking it, right? No, because they were involved in it. They're part of it. But the reality of revolution and protest movements and all this kind of stuff is that they're bigger than the people who are organizing them. They're bigger than the people who are organizing them. That the zeitgeist and the energy that swirls around a society is larger than the people who are in the vanguard, right? And that's just the fundamental truth. That should a revolution sweep through North America, it's going to have that exact same feel. It's going to have that exact same tone. It's just going to come upon us. And the goal for us is to be ready for it, right? And it's not hijacking it, right? It's involving yourself in it. And people like Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky, when they involve themselves in it, they're the most prepared. right? They set themselves up to be of this vanguard party. They set themselves up to be the most literate, the most read, the most articulate, the most capable of showing people that they were the voice of this zeitgeist, right? So while the zeitgeist itself may have come about without their unexpectedly, which it always does, right? They certainly prove to that zeitgeist that they're the ones that are the most capable of representing it. And how do we know that? Because everybody voted for them, right? Everybody fucking votes for these guys. Like Lenin and Stalin and Trotsky ascend to the top of the food chain, right? Because people look at them and go, yeah, these guys seem to know what's going on, right? Because this was their life's project. This is what they spent their life doing. I think it's also important to note that in the time of Lenin, high art, was mostly purchased by the ruling class and supported by the ruling class, so it represented ruling class ideology. Yeah, you can see that as well in China, right? That, like, the Chinese chased out a lot of their artists, because a lot of their artists were essentially bourgeoisie representatives, right? Like, they were essentially just there to represent the ruling class, and they were part of the ruling class. And so that's another part of it, right? Like you get rid of the artists that represent the cultural force that you're fighting against, you know? Like, revolutions aren't clean affairs. There's a lot of muddiness to them. Anyway. Look at this stuff. Isn't it neat? Wouldn't you think my collection's complete? I gotta say, I'm looking forward to The Little Mermaid. I do. I am. I actually am. It's one of those. It's a film where I actually think they could do some really, really cool shit because of, like, modern CGI and modern special effects, right? They can do some really cool shit. Like, you think about, like, Ursula, just Ursula as a villain, and what happens to Ursula and Ursula's story, and how fucking cool. They can make it cool. Like, they can do a lot of cool shit. As long as they just tell the fucking story. This is my big complaint with modern storytellers, right? They just seem to not want to actually tell the fucking story. You know? They want to do something else. They want to put in a political agenda and do some political propaganda piece. Right? They don't actually want to just tell the fucking story. Which I'm just, like, annoyed by all the time. Alright, we got calls. We got 13 people. We got 13 people watching right now. I expect to see 13 numbers in the chat. Here we go. Today's number is... I'm in for a 5. I'm in for a 5.
Here we go for today's number.
Here we go for today's number.
2022.
Here we go. We only got a 4 and an 8 right now. 10 balls.
Each ball has a number.
Each ball has a number. We got a 3. We got another 4.
1 through 10.
1 through 10. Swirl the numbers. Yeah, swirl the numbers. Wow, only 4 people. Only 4 people. I'm blown away, guys. I'm blown away. Today's number is 6. Well, with such soft participation today, it's hard not to believe that we missed it, but we missed it. It threaded the needle, though. Oh, no, it didn't. It didn't thread the needle this time. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. God damn it, Generation Y Me. I know. You almost had it. You just had to double that number, right? Yeah, you just had to double that number. It's all right. It's all right. We're all still here, right? The energy of David Lynch is moving on somewhere else, going on somewhere else. Anemone coming in late with a 7, right? A good, honest 7, right? Good try, Anemone. That does mean that we threaded the needle, right? Yeah. Lynch swerving harder than Curry. You got it. That's okay. You know, we're all here together. We all failed together. What are we doing? Oh yeah, I love this one. Not to be a drooling socialist cuck, but if a full day's labor can't purchase 3 square meals, 24 hours worth of rent and utilities, a fraction of a month's clothing budget, and a reasonable portion to be saved for when you can no longer comfortably work, then what the fuck are we doing shit for? Yep. Like, yeah. Like, if a full day's work doesn't actually give you a reasonable life, then why are we working? Well, okay, but from what I remember, that Lenin and Trotsky weren't even around when the revolution was happening. They're not even in the country, so they arrived. The scene. They simply hijacked the revolution that was occurring. If I remember correct, they even left the country because they believed nothing was going to have happened. Once they took power, they denied the individual liberties of people, did everything in their power to crush any dissident voice because they believed that an elite party, aka the Vanguard Party, was needed to direct the will of the people. Yeah, anyone who's outside the party, their voice doesn't matter and should be crushed. Yeah, no, but that's just true on the face of it. So essentially all you just said to me, Eric, was revolutionaries don't know when a revolution is going to occur, right? They don't know if it's going to be effective, and that they believed, and I think it's correct that they believed that you need a vanguard party to maintain control and order, right? Like, they're very open about that. Like, that's not a secret, right? Like, I don't think there's anything controversial in what you just wrote. Like, I don't know where the controversy is supposed to be. That, like, yes. So the revolutionaries don't know when a revolution is going to come because they don't control the minds of the people, right? They're not telepaths. They can't, like, get into the individual minds of every person in the country all at once and, like, a zeitgeist mind hive, move the people forward, right? That revolutions happen in this manner, right? In a way that carries with it a great deal of uncertainty. So uncertain that it's like they're literally not in the country at the time that it occurs, right? And nor do they believe it'll be effective. Okay, but it is. So the question is, what comes next? Right? And if you just read Lenin's writing and Trotsky's writing and even Stalin's writing, they're all of a mind that, yeah, you need a vanguard party who's going to seize control of the energy, the chaos of the people, in order to establish some kind of order, to insist that there is actually a structure to this piece. Because if you don't actually have a structure, then you leave yourself vulnerable to external attack. And if you're living in Russia, right, you're very aware of external attack being something that's built into the society, that's built into the structure of Russian society. Like, Russia has invaded multiple times, over and over and over again. And so this argument that's like, what should have occurred then? So the revolution occurs, and then what? Right? You just have a rabulous group of people going around, like, just so it's the anarchy principle, I suppose. Right? So then, okay. So then the external forces come and sweep through your country, and you're just a disorganized rabble, and that's the end of it. Right? Like, I don't see where the controversy is here. So Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky, after having dedicated their entire lives to pushing forward revolutionary principles, experience the revolution and get involved in the zeitgeist energy that is that, and then become part of the established leadership at the very top of it. It's not a hijacking, right? Like, you're literally just saying to me that these guys were the most organized and were capable of galvanizing the most public support. That what's the controversy? Like, you can try to twist that into something weird and odd, but it's not. It's not weird and odd at all, right? That there was a revolution that occurred, and that if these guys weren't ready for it, if they didn't have the positioning, then they would never get to that point. It's not a hijacking, right? It's a very odd idea, I think, to say that it's a hijacking. What are you even talking about? Like, you have a group of people who just committed to a revolution and are kind of looking around being like, well, now what? And here's a group of guys who have been saying the entire time, this is what we should do, right? And they've been saying it for years. This is what we should do. And enough people go, yeah, okay, this is what we should do. That becomes what they should do. And they did it. It's not hijacking, right? And if the mass of the people, if the revolutionaries thought that Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin were full of shit, then Lenin and Trotsky and Stalin would go nowhere. Like, how in the hell do these guys, quote unquote, hijack this? Like, the more you think about it, the sillier that gets, right? You can't hijack it. You need support from people. You need support from people. They can't just, like, walk up to the Kremlin and walk into the palace and be like, I'm Lenin, I'm the leader now. And have everybody go, yes, I guess that's true. Like, what a hijacking, right? No, they needed to actually have the support of the people. And you can see video after video. Like, they were videotaping a lot of this stuff. You can see it, where Lenin is talking, and there's thousands of people listening to this guy, and thousands of people hearing what he has to say, right? Lenin was an established revolutionary figure. People respected him. And just because it didn't happen with, like, just because it wasn't like a fucking Bug's Life, just because it wasn't like Lenin standing up and saying, now is the time for revolution, and everybody stood up and went, that is correct, now is the time, and they all marched to the bin and they cast off and they did it, just because it didn't look like a Disney film, right, doesn't mean anything. Oh, so it was messier than that. Oh. But, like, the hard truth, right, the hard truth is that if Lenin didn't have the support of the people, he wouldn't be the leader. Just full stop. Like, full stop. If the people who committed to a revolution didn't trust this guy, he wouldn't be the leader. Full stop. Like, you can't hijack that. You can't come in and be like, we're taking over, without there being some kind of acceptance and some kind of acknowledgement that, like, yeah, Lenin's capable, Lenin's competent, we trust Lenin, right? He can't just show up and do that. It's just not the way it works. Here's a great one. I love this one. Let me out and we'll fight communism together. Sock Dems, fascism, right? Lets them out. What do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going to happen? That's it. This is basically what is happening today, right? That you have, like, social democracies and social democratic people and people who consider themselves, quote unquote, centrists, right? Actually aligning themselves with people on the far right, right? Like, you can see this with a figure like Jordan Peterson, right? That people you would consider centrists or this kind of thing actually, like, take this guy seriously and say, like, oh, he's actually got some interesting stuff to say. It's like, no, you're just admitting that you're a fascist. That when a fascist stands up and spreads around their fascist ideology, you go, oh, I can align myself with that because the negative consequences of it. Yet the mega communist things has been happening a lot, eh? I've been seeing that a lot recently. I haven't wanted to, like, really bring it to the fore and talk about it so much because I'm still, like, really formulating my opinion, but it literally can't work, right? Like, by definition. So it's like saying wet fire, you know? Like, it's just not going to work. That one force has to destroy the other, and we know which force is going to destroy the other in that arrangement, right? That we know that fascism destroys communism in that arrangement, because the quote unquote communist minded people who are getting involved in that arrangement are attempting to act in good faith and are attempting to build something and are attempting to create a society that's actually beneficial for people. Right? Whereas the fascists are attempting to dominate and control. And when the rubber hits the road and the question of whose vision is actually going to be enacted upon, well, the communists are going to find themselves at the end of a barrel of a gun. That's what's going to happen. Because fascists are not talking or debating in good faith. Right? They're not actually platforming themselves in order to have good faith debates and create a compromised position or an understanding between one another, between themselves and people of opposing views, right? That when fascists talk, it's exclusively to promote fascism and to tell people how to find fascists so that they can find other fascists and gain power. Because that's the only thing fascists are attempting to do, is gain power. And at the end of the day, they know that should it come down to it, right? Well, they've got guns that they're willing to use, and the other side doesn't. And that's really the truth. And you can never align yourself with that. You can never actually align yourself with that. Because it's the exact same thing that's happening in Ukraine, right? That you see a bunch of quote-unquote centrist-minded people saying, like, oh, it's okay that we funded Nazis in Ukraine because they're fighting Russians. So they're fodder for Russians, right? It doesn't work. And so what's the best case scenario for you? The best case scenario is that the Nazis win, right? That the Nazis actually defeat the Russians for you. And then what are the Nazis going to do? Well, the Nazis are going to take power. How are they going to do that? They're going to use their guns that you gave them, right? They're going to take the guns that you gave them, and then they're going to go to the halls of power, and they're going to seize power with the guns that you gave them, right? That's what's happening with Zelensky, by the way. Like, Zelensky is basically operating at the end of a barrel of a gun, and he knows it, right? When he goes to the front line, he's elected on a platform of ending the Donbass war. He goes to the front line, where the Nazis are, and he says, we're going to end this war. And you know what the Nazis said? Fuck off. That's what they said, right? And since then, they've basically been telling Zelensky what to do under the threat of being shot. That's what's going on with Zelensky, right? That everybody's like, oh, you keep saying that Ukraine is Nazi, but they elected a Jew. How does that make any sense? Yeah, sure. The wider populace elected a Jew, right? The Nazis are the ones with the guns that they're willing to use. Like, this is how baby-brained the social democracies have become. That they genuinely think that they're going to be able to defeat Nazis and defeat fascists by voting in a ballot booth. That they actually think that Nazis and fascists are going to take seriously edicts given by elected officials. When fascists respond to war, they commit to war, they use war, they revel in conflict. And how do you know? They tell you. They fucking tell you. Directly to your face. Before they shoot you. And these are the people that we're supposed to believe are going to ally with us? No. Because here's the truth. You aren't using Nazis. Nazis use you. If you think you're using Nazis, you are fooling yourself. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to who's in charge, you're going to find that the Nazis are more than happy to use those guns. And use them on you. So if you're a communist walking around thinking, maybe we should reach out to the MAGA crowd, and maybe we should reach out to these fucking Nazis, you're going to find that when the rubber hits the road and it comes time to actually pass edicts, you're going to be in a fucking concentration camp. You're being used. You're not using the Nazis. They're using you. Very straightforwardly. So this whole mega commie thing, all it is the fascists being fascists and the communists, quote unquote, being delusional. The history of communism and Nazism tells you exactly what the Nazis are going to do. Tells you exactly what the Nazis are going to do. Yeah, Pierre will fund and arm Ukraine just like the liberals. Exactly. Yeah, Pierre's been very clear about that. He's right on course with the Imperium, right? That's why Pierre Poilievre isn't going to be that much different from the liberals. Right? They're going to operate very similarly. From generations, Zelensky being Jewish, so Ukraine government does not equal Nazi. I remember being on our Paul and seeing users talk about Israel as not the heroes we want, but the heroes we deserve in context of Palestine. Ugh. That's gross, right? Like, it's gross to see how, like, we are much closer to fascism than people want to admit. Like, that's the real hard truth. That there's been a lot of people who have been walking around pretending to be centrists, but the reason why they've been centrist this whole time is to act as a facade for their overt fascism. Right? Like, there's shit happening on the world stage that is as bad, if not worse, than what the Nazis are doing. Right? Yeah, Nazis don't have a problem with Jews as long as they're useful and convenient. Exactly. That's exactly true. And the moment that they're not, they'll shoot them. Right? Like, people have a very baby-brained idea of how Nazis operate. And a very naive perspective. And if you want to see how naive people are, you don't need to look any further than Joe Rogan. Right? Like, and I'm not saying this to be like Joe Rogan is a CIA plant or he's embedded with all this kind of stuff, but like Joe Rogan's idea, which is good speech beats bad speech, right, is naive. He says it all the time, right? People will say, hey, you're platforming a Nazi. Like, you're platforming people who are alt-right, you're platforming people who are part of the Oath Keepers, you're platforming people who are the creators of Nazi groups. Like, how do you justify this? And like, you're platforming people like Ben Shapiro, like Jordan Peterson. How do you justify this? And his justification is, well, bad speech beats good speech. Or sorry, good speech beats bad speech. That's his justification. That we take the bad speech and we take the good speech and we put them together and the good speech beats the bad speech. Right? But it's naive. And it's naive very simply because it assumes that the people who are putting forward bad speech are doing so in good faith. That they actually believe what they espouse, or they're actually attempting to find middle grounds, or they're attempting to find compromise, or that their minds can be changed. Right? There's a lot of assumptions that come with this idea of good speech beats bad speech. Right? When the truth is that the only reason why Nazis are talking in the first place is to obfuscate, confuse, and buffalo the conversation so that they can promote their ideology and get like-minded people, i.e. other fascists and Nazis, to know where to go, to organize. They're not going on the Joe Rogan Experience to convince anybody of anything. They're going to say, hey, here's where you find the Nazis. Here's where you find the Nazis. That's what they're doing. And so Joe Rogan becomes a useful idiot for these people. He becomes a person who is willing to platform Nazis and allow them to proliferate and organize and find one another under this naive argument of good speech beats bad speech, but the Nazis don't care about speech. They have guns and they're willing to use them. The only reason they're talking is to try to deflect you from that position. Like, a guy like Ben Shapiro goes on Joe Rogan and literally calls for purges and mass military action. Like, he literally says that you should flood black neighborhoods with cops. Like, what is that if not a call for a fucking genocide? Like, this is like one of the leaders of the right in the media landscape, literally going on the largest podcast and saying, yeah, we should commit to purges. We should do a pogrom. Like, we should just flood the area with cops, right? Like, if you're a Nazi, you're looking at someone like Ben Shapiro being like, that's right, yeah, let's do that, right? And Joe Rogan just, like, platforms him, has him on, says Duncan Trussell confronts him on this at one point, and Joe Rogan says, I think we can change him. I think we can turn him to our side. No, you can't. No, you can't. Nazis are Nazis. It's like trying to say you can convince Ted Bundy that killing people is bad and so he's not going to do it. Like, There's something dark in their soul. There's something going on that has convinced them that the way forward is through murder. You're not going to convince them through good speech. It's not how it's going to work. And certainly not if you fund them. Certainly not if you give them weapons, training, access, intelligence services, satellite connections. Right? You're definitely not going to convince them if you give them power. Which is exactly what's happening in Ukraine. There's no alternative now, by the way. Right? There's no alternative. Zelensky, on behalf of the Nazi Party, banned the communist, socialist, liberal, including the leaders of the opposition party in Ukraine, which has left exclusively the only options that exist now in the parliament are right wing and far right, including a Nazi party. So where the fuck do you think Ukraine is going to go? Right? Do you think Ukraine is going to suddenly become like this bastion of freedom and social democracy and all this kind of stuff? It can't. They banned those parties. So the only option is for the country to swing to the far right. And you wait. We are going to see Nazi salutes in the parliament. We are going to see parliamentarians, including the leader of the country, doing the Nazi salute. We are going to see that because there's no other alternative. There's no other option. It must go that way, right? Like if you walk up to a house of cards and you knock out the bottom, what's going to happen? And it's not even a prediction. It has to do it. It can't not. So Chrystia Freeland is going to fuck off to her new gig in NATO because it's over for Trudeau. Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. Like, Chrystia Freeland's a Nazi, and she's interested in power, right? She wants to go to the place where she can inflict the most damage. Like, that's what she wants to do. And NATO is perfect for her. It's the perfect place. That we are seeing this swing over to Polyev. It's... I don't want to say it's likely he's going to win. Like, I don't actually want to say that it's likely that Pierre Poilievre is going to win. But he's definitely the best shot. Like, he's got a much better shot at it than Scheer or O'Toole. And I really don't think the Liberals are up to the challenge. I don't think they're ready for the fight. Right? I think the Liberals... were always complacent. I think that they had a lot of energy under Trudeau the first time, but that energy has steadily dissipated. And now when they stand up and talk, they seem tired. They don't seem capable or interested, frankly. Not really. And it's because I think they've been ground down by the reality of what it is to live in an oligarchy, and that they have convinced themselves that the way to move forward is by negotiating with the oligarchy. And you saw this, like there was this interview that Stephen Guilbeault gave recently that I read on the channel, right? And the whole time Stephen Guilbeault was like, yeah, we're being sued and all this kind of stuff, right? It slows down the process, so on and so forth. And that's because they're negotiating with these people. Right? And my position, you guys know what it is, right? We shouldn't be negotiating with these guys. We should nationalize the service. We should get rid of them. We should end the negotiation. We should make it so that when we make a decision, that's the decision. And if these guys stand up and say, hey, then we tell them to fuck off. And how do you do that? You nationalize it. You tell them that you're incompetent, incapable, not willing to participate, so you're out of the conversation. And how do you do that? You nationalize it. And I mean, arrest them as well, by the way. Like, all of the fossil fuel executives, all of the shareholders, like, all of these guys should be arrested. Like, no question. We should be holding, like, a mass tribunal to put these guys on trial for their overt, obvious crimes against humanity. Like, absolutely. And the liberals aren't up to it. They're not willing to do it because they're part of it, right? Because they're part of the oligarchy. And incidentally, neither are the NDP, right? The NDP aren't up to it. They're not saying out loud, hey, we've got to actually nationalize this shit. Hey, we've actually got to like take control of these industries and make decisions without the oligarchy present, because they're obviously psychotic. Like they're not actually saying that kind of stuff. Like the NDP is the weakest opposition I could possibly imagine. Like it's just pathetic, just pathetic. Like their solutions are essentially just more piecemeal reformism. Well, we see where that gets us, right? We see where that gets us, and so we're gonna chances are good, right, that we're gonna end up with a conservative party, right? But honestly, like, it's going to rule pretty much how the liberals have ruled. Like, it's not going to be that much different. For all the craziness that's going to come our way, right? For all of the, like, it is going to be a radicalizing moment, I think, for lots of people. Just like Roe v. Wade was for a lot of people, right? But my perspective is it's like, yeah, it's just like a blue liberal party. Like, the conservatives are not really that different from the liberals. Like they're pretty in tandem with one another. They work together. Like I call them, like for fuck's sake, I say they're allies, right? And it's just a vanity project for Trudeau. He just wants to be the prime minister, and Pierre Poilievre just wants to be the prime minister, and so he's willing to say whatever he needs to say to do it, right? And you know, he's an effective liar, and so he's going to probably be fairly successful. Yeah, I see a rise of fascism in USA government as a whole. Yeah, of course. Like, not only... People tend to look at fascism as a thing that happens amongst the leadership, but it is a thing that happens within the public itself, right? Like, I am routinely having conversations with fascists. Like, people whose ideology is fascist. The whole idea of, like, individualism, right? It is a fascist ideology. And it's a fascist ideology for a very simple reason, right? Because it elevates the individual above even creation itself. That's why it's a fascist ideology. That it pretends as though there is this Ubermensch, this superhero individual who can supersede even the powers of the universe itself. And so it elevates the individual into the station of God. And it can't be maintained. It can't be sustained. It can only lead to utter destruction, which we've seen in figures like Hitler and Mussolini, right? Which we've seen through Japanese imperialism, right? That fascism promotes this idea that your life is a hero's journey, that your life is this heroic venture, and that you are the author of your own fate. Right? That's one of the expressions of fascism that people like Jordan Peterson sell as a product, right? And it's disastrous, right? I can see new chats. Make sure you're in live chat, okay, generation? Make sure you're in live chat. Live chat is less censorship-y. And so the rise in fascism, right, is simultaneously being fueled by, you know, the loser narcissists at the top, your Trumps and your Pierre Poilievres and all this kind of stuff. But it's also coming from a group of disenfranchised citizens, right? We tend to say young white men, but it's not exclusively young white men, but disenfranchised citizens who are attempting to seize their own personal power, right? And through the process of seizing their own personal power, they're easy to direct away from the forces that are actually oppressing them, right? The ownership class and the structure of the capitalist system itself, onto other groups, right? Oh, it's too expensive to take care of the disabled. Oh, it's too expensive to take care of the poor. Oh, the real problem is the Jews, right? Like the real problem is this ethnic group. Immigrants are coming to take your jobs. We got to build a wall. Keep those immigrants out, right? We've got to erect an entire police state system and a concentration camp system. in order to keep these immigrants out, right? Like, it's this scapegoating that allows the capitalist class to maintain its power and to keep people fighting along any line other than the fact that you're owned, right? That there is an ownership class. Make sure that everybody is constantly talking about anything other than the fact that there's an ownership class, and that ownership class is attempting to maintain their positions of privilege and status. Yeah, we solved the problem, generation. We did it together. I think fascists love to feign benign interests in social problems without really offering solutions on purpose. Yeah, they use rhetoric to prime people for their true intentions. That's exactly right. No, I think that's exactly right. That you can see that the more and more you listen to Peterson, the more you can see it, right? That he is overtly a fascist. That they're just acting as contrarians in order to muddy the conversation, and that the best debaters, right, the people who are the most intelligent and the most capable, or see through them the easiest, right, are able to paint them into a corner and ask them very plainly, okay, well, this is the problem, what's your solution? And they don't offer any because they don't have any, right? They don't have solutions because their solution is purging. That is their solution, right? The solution of the fascist is always to purge, right? And you can see this in films like The Purge, right? You can see this impulse, this idea that comes out of the society in film and television, that we need to purge certain aspects of the society. And what separates us is that we don't insist that there needs to be a purge of this type, that we're trying to fight a system, a structure. I know that I am guilty, especially when I call for the arrest of climate change disaster, the people who are creating climate change disasters, right? But truly, like, what we need to be focused on and what we need to continuously fight against is the structure itself, and to move to transferring the means of production away from the capitalist class into the hands of the working class. That's the real goal. Yet we can clearly see it in Peterson and his change in language about trans people. Yeah, in 2016, he used to use proper pronouns with passing trans people. Now he dead names and misgenders openly. Yeah. Well, and it's useful for him to do that, right? It's useful for his brand, right? Because it's a way to galvanize more fascists and to get them underneath his umbrella, right? Well, and not enough people will notice he just wants to dehumanize. Yeah, of course. Right? Like, that's his brand now. Like, we really are witnessing, like, the ascension of a supervillain, right? Like, a guy like Peterson is, like, what's going to happen to Peterson is that he's going to pass the baton on to a protege, right? Because Peterson gets old and dies too, thankfully. But, like, so he's created this group, right? There's this group of people who are ostensibly fascist in their worldview, right? That they will tell you that you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps even as the society does everything it can to clamp down on you, right? So it ends up being just the ideology of a bully, right? It's acceptable for us to put our boot on your back and press you into the ground. But if you point out that we're doing that, then it's a you problem, right? So it's gaslighting. It's the ideology of a gaslighter. It's the ideology of a bully. And if you and the true danger of what Peterson is and what he's done is that he will eventually pass the baton on to a protege who will also be a fairly extensive fascist, right? The difference being that I think that Peterson is a fascist by proclivity, right? I think he just has always been a fascist in his ideology and his worldview, and he doesn't understand or acknowledge that he is indeed a fascist, right? The guy he passes the baton to will, and will be open about it. And like, you have somebody like Matt Walsh is a good example, right? Matt Walsh calls himself a theocratic fascist and is very open about being a fascist. And if which I think is extremely dangerous. I think it's extremely dangerous that there's this guy walking around calling himself a theocratic fascist that gets access to literally anything, right? That the Daily Beast lets him sit at the table. That people like Ben Shapiro let this guy actually talk. That Twitter allows him on their platforms. That literally anybody listens to what this guy says, while he openly calls himself a theocratic fascist. And you think about the Peterson crowd, and they are finding themselves under this, like, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson umbrella. And it's fascist. And the next generation of this group is going to push in under overt fascists who are going to be open about it, right? Like Matt Walsh is, right? And the more we platform them and the more we pretend that good speech beats bad speech, the stronger they're going to get. The stronger they're going to get. And like, we are witnessing the United States decline rapidly into a theocratic fascism. And it's going to have terrifying effects. Like, societies don't do well under fascism, right? Like, the retrograde that is coming for America is going to be extreme. Like, it's going to be extreme. People are going to be shocked at how fast it happened. Like, that's like, we're not ready for this. We're not mentally prepared for the speed of the decline. That we want to believe that it's going to happen steadily. Like, people can acknowledge that America is going into a decline, right? People will acknowledge generally that, sure, yeah, I can see America's going into a decline, right? Like, that it's good, but that decline is going to be slow and steady, right? There's going to be like a soft landing, right? Nope, it's not how it's going to work. It's not how it's going to work. That once the collapses begin, right? Once the collapses begin to take hold, and once we're ruled by a class of people who are completely committed to the idea that it's up to you, right? Bootstrap yourself. Society doesn't owe you anything, right? Society doesn't owe you anything. So once the collapses begin, right? Well, it's just up to you. Bootstrap yourself, right? So the expansion of the tent cities, the expansion of homelessness in the millions, water lines. Like, literally, climate change is drying up water supplies. You're going to start seeing conflict over water, and it's going to happen very quickly. It's not going to be slow. It's not going to be slow and steady, right? Places that seemed to be stable will destabilize, and it will happen very fast. And the ruling class will just retreat to their Jeffrey Epstein sex slave islands. That's how it's going to go, right? And how do we know? Because it can't go any other way. Like, unless the aliens literally land, and are just like, yeah, guys, come on, right? Unless some, like, serious force, like, unless the fucking seventh seal opens and the angels of God descend, right, and the rapture occurs, right, some kind of crazy shit. Like, if you walk up to a house of cards and you knock out the bottom row, what happens? It's not a prediction, right? It's not a prediction. Like, if you put 1 + 1 equals, it's not a prediction. Like, it must be that way. And if you're in a society where the vast majority of what's called, quote unquote, the economy is fictitious, which is the financialization of the system, right? If the economic growth that's occurring in your society is literally just rich people buying houses, right, swapping assets with one another, if the growth of your economy is impingent on this casino you call the stock exchange, right, while the actual living conditions of the vast majority of your populace declines, it doesn't take a genius to figure out where this all goes, right? And it's not a prediction. You don't need to sit there and be like a Malthusian prophet or something, right? That if you build a sandcastle in low tide, when the tide comes in, your sandcastle gets washed away. It's not a prediction. Like, this is what's so nuts about what's happening in Western society, is that it's gotten so bad and it's gotten so obvious and apparent what's coming for us. Like, if a building is collapsing and it's here, it's not a prediction to say it's going to be here, right? When it hits the ground, you don't get to walk around and be like, yeah, called it, prediction. It's not a prediction, right? And American society, Western society, is going to collapse in serious ways. And when it collapses, the people who are in charge of it are going to be walking around saying, society doesn't owe you anything. And so the only tool that Western civilization will have left, right? Because it hasn't built anything. It hasn't created any institutional strength. It's defanged a lot of it's defunded a lot of its institutions in an effort to privatize them, right? In an effort to continue the decline, to feast upon the corpse, right? That's what capitalism is currently doing. It's attempting to just cannibalize itself, right? To continue eating any institution that exists, right? To degenerate the education system, to degenerate the healthcare system, to turn everything into just a privatized system to profit from, right? Which is going to decline the society back into a feudal structure very rapidly, very, very quickly. And so the only tool that it will actually have left that will have any importance whatsoever on the world stage will be its military, right? And the military can't be sustained because the tax base, the productive energy of the citizenry, won't be able to actually funnel any energy into this. And so what you're going to experience, and what we are going to experience, and what we're currently experiencing, is the Western world using the military in acts of enormous desperation in order to seek credibility for itself. And again, I don't consider this a prediction. Like, this is all it's got left, right? This is all it's got left. Good to see you, Base. That, like, all it can do is use the only tool it's got left to try to assert itself on the world stage, and it's going to fail. It's not going to work because the other societies that it's attempting to dominate are ready for it. And so it might destroy a bunch of shit, right? It might use its weapons and actually get something done, right? Blow something up. But places like China and Russia and India, right? They're going to have built up their productive capacity enough so that they can rebuild faster than the United States can, right? Because the United States doesn't build anything. It doesn't have the productive capacity any longer. And so America's going to blow up everything, like do a whole bunch of... And then China's going to rebuild it and then move on. And America might not realize that this is happening until major cities have bombs dropping in on them. Like, if they start a war with China, China's not going to just be like, oh, I guess we got bombs dropped on us. And how do we know? Because the Chinese have said so. Just like the Russians have said so. If you drop bombs on Moscow, say bye-bye to Berlin. They've said so. And if the Americans use their military against the Chinese, which they eventually will, because they've lost the capacity to think rationally, they don't have any other tools, they don't understand how to build a civilization, nor do they care to understand how to build a civilization, right? So once they attack China, China's going to strike back. And China's going to win. Because China has a productive capacity and a highly motivated population, which incidentally is like 5 times as many people. And China's going to win. And America is going to be left with nothing. Its military capacity will be destroyed. It doesn't have an infrastructure base. It doesn't have a productive manufacturing sector. It doesn't have a productive tech sector. And watch what happens to all these billionaire oligarchs the second this shit starts happening. They're just gonna leave. They're going to abandon America. Like Adam Smith predicted they would and hoped they wouldn't because of a home bias. That was Adam Smith's argument. He was confronted with this very reality. Adam Smith, when he was talking about economics. Why don't the rich just ship the manufacturing to another country? And Adam Smith said, well, I hope they don't because they'll have a home bias. Well, guess what? That proved to be false. And it's going to prove to be false when it comes to the oligarchy actually trying to nation build. They'll just leave. They'll take their money and they'll leave. Like they have been saying they were going to the whole time. How many times have we said, like, oh, let's raise taxes on the wealthy, and what if the wealthy said, oh, we'll just leave? Yeah? So, this rising fascism that's happening in America, that's happening in the Western world, it's going to have extremely serious consequences. We're not going to get out of it unscathed. That's not real. And it's impossible for me to see any other path for the Western world outside of a return to feudal monarchy. That sections of the society are going to essentially be monarchical in the way that they act and the way that they are. And the transition is already underway. And it's very difficult for me to see that there is going to be a unification project in America. That it's very likely that America balkanizes. It's very likely that that happens. Because, I mean, especially if the war comes to America. Like, if bombs start dropping on American cities, like, I think that America will go crazy. Like it did post 9/11. Remember post 9/11? Remember how insane America was after 9/11? Right? Like literally, American flags were everywhere. Patriotism was all over the place. If you dared to stand up and say, like, yeah, like this was a natural consequence of our actions in the Middle East, you were censored, blackballed. Remember Bill Maher got his show taken away because he said that, right? Like, can you imagine what will happen if there is a Chinese carrier off the coast of California? Like, can you imagine what that will look like? Do you think America is going to react rationally to this? Do you think that people like me are going to be able to stand up and say what I just said right now, that all of this is of America's own making? that it could very easily not do any of this, that it could very easily cease this madness, that it could very easily stop the war machine, stop moving in the world this way, start building up its own manufacturing base, start focusing on itself, start building up its own productive capacity, start building up its own infrastructure, start building up a civil society that's worth living in. Do you think Americans are going to respond to that? No, because fascism exists within the heart of the American people, and has for a long time. Ligand Z says, 9/11 felt like a Holocaust to Americans. Imagine how they'll feel if they experience something bigger than that. Yeah. And if they poke China, that's exactly what's going to happen. It's very, very, very different. It's very, very difficult. Well, no, I mean, like, it's, I wouldn't say it's rational, but it's normal that if you're struck to strike back, right? Like, that's not rational, though. Like, that's something non-rational. It's not irrational. It's non-rational, right? Like, if somebody walks up to you and starts punching you in the face, you're gonna defend yourself, right? Right? You're gonna defend yourself, and it doesn't matter if that guy is coming over and punching you in the face because you're beating up his wife, right? Like, if you're standing there punching his wife in the face and a guy comes over and starts punching you in the face, you're going to defend yourself, right? So you're acting non-rationally. But it's completely reasonable that the guy walked over and started fighting you, right? Like, that's rational. Like, what America is currently doing is not rational. That they are fomenting war when they don't have to. This is the part of the conversation that America simply doesn't want to hear. It's simply nobody in the legacy media, nobody anywhere is willing to actually stand up and say, we could just not do war. And when you stand up and actually say, hey, we should just not do war, then you're a Putin puppet, right? You're a Xi Jinping apologist. You're a Uyghur genocide apologist, right? Because America really cares about these things, right? They care so much about genocide that they're committing 3 right now, right? Like, yeah, water lines, baby. Water lines. This one has taken me aback, I'll admit it. Like, it was only until about a year ago that I actually started to believe that the water lines would happen. You know? Because water is such a gimme. It's such a just like, yeah, of course, water. There's water everywhere. The planet is mostly water. Like, water. And when the grumblings began of like, yeah, there's going to be like water conflicts and water war and all that kind of stuff. Initially, I was just like, what? No, probably not. Like, that sounds very conspiratorial. But now here we are. Right? Here we are. Because we've refused to actually build proper infrastructure, and we've refused to actually take seriously the threat of water shortage, and we've refused to take climate change seriously. We've literally looked at Mother Nature and said, we're better than that. She'll accommodate. Right? We've literally looked at Mother Nature and said she'll accommodate. That's my favorite. That is actually my favorite. That, like, there are people who actually think that Earth is gonna give a fuck about us. Like, that's my favorite. That we really do think that, oh, we'll just, like, adapt. We'll pivot out of it. Right? Did the citizens of the city of Pompeii pivot out of it? How did the citizens of the city of Pompeii adapt? How did that work out for them? Right? Yeah. Did they take the pandemic seriously, though? Because initially, right, Kant, you say they did experience it. It was the pandemic. They put up with it splendidly, yeah. Did they take it seriously, though? Because what I see as 1 million COVID deaths is nothing but an afterthought to them, yeah. Yeah. I think you can see that pretty clearly in how people are, like, mourning the death of the Queen. But there's no day of mourning. There's no week of mourning or 10 days of mourning for the COVID victims, right? We're not attempting to build some kind of catharsis, some kind of moment of reconciliation. We're not interested in that. It's just it's just people. Who cares? Now the Queen. Yeah. They tolerated 1 million preventable deaths. Yeah. Right? Might makes right. It's just another purge. Right? Let's get these weak people out of here. Society doesn't owe them anything. Right? Let's just purge them. Bye-bye. Right? It's boomer remover. There's another one. Right? There's another one. Like, make no mistake, this fascist spirit exists within Gen Z. Right? That there's a nihilism that's gripping the youth. That it's becoming very erratic and destructive. That they know they're being abandoned, and some of them are turning towards socialism and communism as an ideal, right? But there's plenty others that are just like, well, pick up a gun, fight for yourself. Society doesn't owe you anything, right? It's all about you. It's all about your own personal survival. And, it's just the blind leading the blind at this point. And society retreats into enclaves. And little kooky cults start to spring up. And people become desperate. People become desperate. And that desperation leads people to follow people who 20, 30 years ago they wouldn't pay any attention to, or they wouldn't take seriously at all. Right? Like, we go back to someone like Peterson, a discredited university professor. Like, it's literally the beginning of a supervillain arc, isn't it? Right? Discredited university professor Otto Octavius. They thought I was mad. Well, I'll show them. We'll see who cancels who. Right? Like, I feel like there's going to be a moment with Peterson. Like, there's going to be a moment. Like, he's going to be on the top of a building or something, fighting Spider-Man. You know? Don't you feel like that's the arc for a guy like this? That somehow he's going to have, like, a button. And then this will show the woke cancel crowd. Ha! 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 And then Spider-Man comes and his hand is stuck to the thing. Spider-Man! Right? Looks like your reign of terror is petered out. Got it. Did you hear about the dad who got so into Q that he killed his family over it? I hadn't heard that, but I'm not surprised. Let's take a look. Compton. QAnon father kills family. Happened just a day ago. Let's look at the Kansas City Star. I think the Kansas City Star is going to give it to us straight. The youngest daughter of a man who shot her sister and killed his wife attributed her father's violence to years of reading QAnon extremism online. Rebecca Lannis, 21, of Walled Lake, Michigan, told WXYZ that her father, Igor Lannis, 53, became a different person after 2020 when former President Donald Trump lost the presidential election. My dad started going down the QAnon rabbit hole, Rebecca wrote in a post on the QAnon Casualties subreddit. The post was made anonymously, but Reddit moderators later verified her identity. QAnon is a collection of right-wing internet conspiracy theories that falsely claim the world is run by a secret group that plotted against Trump, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. Rebecca Lannis said in a Reddit post that her dad kept reading conspiracy theories about the stolen election, Trump, vaccines, etc. It kept getting worse. She said her father's mental health worsened as he read the online extremism, QAnon, right-wing extremism, she told WXYZ. Then my Q dad snapped, she posted on Reddit. The internet ruined him. Igor Lannis is accused of shooting his 25-year-old daughter in the back of the legs before fatally shooting his 56-year-old wife and the family dog just after 4 a.m. on Sunday, September 11th, the Oakland County Sheriff's Office said in a news release. Yep. People are in despair. Despair is exactly the word. It's a big, big reason why I'm doing this. Sometimes it feels like I'm just screaming into an empty void. Sometimes I wonder, why is this valuable? Does this have value, what I'm doing? And I believe in my heart that the value of this is to try to make some kind of fucking sense of any of this. That one day, someone will tell me, John, I was down the QAnon hole, I was going down this, and I stumbled across you, and you helped me out of it. And Mr. Moon is confirming that a lot. It helps my mental health, makes me know I'm not alone, and that's a big part of it, isn't it, Mr. Moon? Because I think about that for myself, you know, whenever I get into that kind of position of why am I doing this? Like, what is this? What is this that I'm doing? I'm not doing it for the money or the fame or the prestige, right? I'm not doing it because it frees up my fucking time. I'm not doing any of that. It's not helping me get girls or anything, right? But I have been isolated before, and living in that isolation is worse in large degrees. It is worse to be isolated in this way. And it's so bad to be isolated in this way that you will gravitate towards groups like QAnon. I'm very, very thankful that when I was in my conspiracy mind and my conspiracy phase, that a group like QAnon did not exist. That I was in the initial beginning of the internet, and that conspiracy groups were largely like still entrenched in like the moon landing is fake and the JFK assassination, the old shit, the old conspiracies, right? Which, in my view, a lot of those old conspiracies have merit to certain degrees and are interesting in their discussion. The new breed of conspiracy theories are just lunatic ravings. But if you can grab a hold of the narrative that they provide, and you can follow the narrative that they're going along with, right, it can provide a type of stability. Because there are lots of people in the world who don't know what's going on at all. Who don't know what's going on at all. Right? And have no outlet, and have nowhere to go, and have nowhere to turn to. And so they're grasping at straws in desperation. And when they find a community that's even attempting, that's even making the attempt to demystify the confusion of the world. And make no mistake. Make no mistake whatsoever. A lot of these QAnon people, and God bless, I'm trying to say this without being dismissive. I'm trying to say this without being mean or cruel or arrogant or dismissive. But a lot of these QAnon people are just simple folk. They're just regular, everyday, normie people who don't know what's going on. They have no structural analysis. And maybe it's too much to say, but I think it's true. They don't necessarily have the capacity to understand the reality of the structure of the society that they live in. That it's easier for them to believe that there is some kind of overmindish, scheming group of people who are in control of world events, rather than what is actually the truth, which is that no one's in charge of any of this. No one's in charge of any of this. We're all just existing here. And that there are institutional structures that make up the backbone of the society that can be observed and analyzed and critiqued. But it's easier for people, I think, to follow the cult of personality. It's easier for people to just believe in icons like Trump, who is iconic. Well, and modern conspiracy theories seem darker because guess what? The power structure has gotten darker. Like, it really has. Like, the reality of modern capitalism is getting darker. Like, the Jeffrey Epstein story alone. Like, that's not a conspiracy. That's not a conspiracy theory. That there was a pedophile, sex trafficker, who was bringing extremely powerful people, we know who they are, right, to a degree. And I think the darkest part of that story is that now that they've put Ghislaine Maxwell in prison, right, and Jeffrey Epstein has been quote-unquote suicided, right, now we know that there's a list. We know that there's a list of names that Ghislaine Maxwell had that has not been released to the public. And the question, of course, is why not? And that's not a conspiracy. Like, that's not a theory. That's not some kind of kooky left field, let's put on the tinfoil hats kind of shit. That the people in power are protecting the powerful. That they are not releasing those names because they know that releasing those names would be an indictment. Because the list is going to contain people like Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Bill Gates, and down it'll go. Like, we already know that Bill Gates went to that island. We already know that Trump and Clinton went to that island. We already know. Yeah, moon landing was fake seems innocent now. Yeah. Even the JFK assassination feels innocent now. Right? Like, and so if that's the reality, if the reality is that Donald Trump and Bill Clinton and Gates and Prince Andrew and all these guys went to a pedophile sex island where they raped little girls, and that's reality, that's the truth, what do you think the conspiracies are going to sound like? We actually know how the MAGAs react. Donald Trump went to that island to scope it out and find out what it was going to do so he could go and fight them. He was doing an undercover operation. Yep, Ghislaine was quietly moved to minimum security prison recently. By quietly, I mean the mainstream didn't think it was newsworthy. Yeah, she's gonna sit in, like, she's in like a fucking resort. That's where she is. Like, People like Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell understand the game they're playing. They understand that they are going to be arrested at some point. They understand it. It's part of the game to them. That they know that at some point they're going to be arrested and they know they're going to go to prison. That's just time served for them. It's just part of it. And Ghislaine Maxwell knows that she was arrested and she did everything she could to protect the interests of the wealthy, and the structure itself is protecting the wealthy by not releasing these names. And she knows that she's gonna go and do time in this very soft, cushy kind of environment. She's always known. It's not a surprise. She's not losing anything. When she pushed her chips in on what she was doing, she understood that this is how it was going to go. That it was unavoidable. Right? Epstein always did, like, when Epstein was arrested the first time, he served 2 years in prison for sex trafficking little girls. Right? So he's always known that the system is going to defend him and that he'll do, quote unquote, do time. But it'll be this, like, easy, he'll just be in a resort. It'll be like a vacation. He just had a 2-year vacation. And then when he got out, he just kept doing it. Like, he just kept doing it. Like, and people like Bill Gates have been trying to defend themselves, but fuck you. Yeah, I was just doing business. You know, I was just doing business with a guy who I thought had good contacts. Yeah, you were doing business with a known pedophile sex trafficker who literally was arrested and incarcerated once for it. Yeah, sure, Bill Gates. Sure. So Bill Gates likes to diddle little girls. Like, that's just obviously the truth. And we're all just supposed to fucking go along with this as if this is a normal society that we're living in. And this is the reality. So you can just imagine what the conspiracy theories are like. Speaking of Epstein, the king just asked Prince Andrew to stand in for him if he gets ill. Yeah, you bet that Charles' name's on that list, by the way. And it's more than Epstein. It was also Jimmy Savile, an entertainer of mostly children, really goes along the Illuminati conspiracy discourse, of course. Conspiracy theorists actually do have good reasons to feel right. This is just it, is that, like, given the absolute horror shows, and incidentally, like, now I haven't even touched on the United States military admitting that there might be aliens, right? Joe Rogan recently had a guy on his podcast who was talking about how he was at Area 51 and how he interacted with one of these spacecrafts. And so now all of this quote-unquote conspiracy stuff is coming to the fore, and there's a lot of conspiracy people that were like, we were fucking right. We were fucking right. We were talking about Area 51, we were talking about aliens, and now here's the fucking military admitting it. We were fucking right. And that's making a lot of these guys who are on the kooky paths, right? Like Donald Trump had the election stolen from him, all this kind of stuff, right? Or even on the other side, like Hillary Clinton had the election stolen because of Russiagate and all this kind of stuff, right? It's just entrenching their position further. That's a plot to militarize space, I think. They don't need to plot that, though. Like, that's the funny thing. Like, since when has America needed a ploy to militarize space? They don't need to have a ploy for that. They're just going to do that. Like, what do you think they're doing with Bezos, and what do you think they're doing with Elon Musk? Yeah, these guys are just interested in colonizing Mars. That's what they're doing. Come on. Like, come on. Obviously, the United States military is in cahoots with Jeff Bezos and in cahoots with Musk, so they can fucking militarize space. That's obviously what they're doing. Like, when I see Jeff Bezos float a gigantic blimp over New York City and send a bunch of drones out with quote-unquote packages, I'm not seeing a dude who's like, this is going to be the new distribution network of the future. I'm seeing a guy that is creating a military operation. That's what that is. Like, you're taking a blimp full of drones and sending it into the center of New York City. What do you think that is, guys? Like Bezos, like, America is only a military operation now. That anything else is ancillary to this. Anything else is ancillary. And I don't think it's conspiratorial to say so. That everything that I have been talking about, right? The decline of the American empire, the decline of the civil society, the collapse of the structure of the American society, the wealthy know. They're very aware of it. They're building bunkers, for fuck's sake, right? And it is an ancient principle that what an empire does in foreign lands, it eventually brings home. You don't think these little fucking robot dogs that's coming out of Boston Dynamics are going to be used? You don't think that these blimps full of drones are going to be used? You don't think that we're going to see a roboticized military? You don't think that any of that's going to happen? I think you're out of your mind. And I don't think it's even close to a conspiracy to say otherwise. We know how these people think. We know what they're doing. We know where their money is being spent. We know what's happening. And we're just being childish. No, I think they feel they need to give a reason, not that really do. They just feel they need to do, so that they do. The ruling class and the military are kind of dumb. Yeah, that's true, actually. Like, that is actually true. Like, they are pretty dumb. Like what they're doing on the world stage and how they're operating is like the definition of stupid. They could simply not. And everything would be better. Like, this is the thing that's so crazy about how America operates in the world. And it truly is because Western civilization has been captured by the ideology of white supremacy. Right? Like, what is American exceptionalism except a white supremacist ethos? It's why the white replacement theory and the diversification of America is so terrifying to it. It's why the worst thing that's happening in America right now is the fucking Black Little Mermaid, right? It's why they can't tolerate seeing a Black Little Mermaid, because it's intrinsically a threat to the white supremacist ethos of Western civilization, and the idea that if you're not white, you're inferior, right? Like, that's the reason why America is constantly at war, and why it has to be at war, and why it has to interact with the rest of the world through war. Because it believes itself to be the predestined, God-given, rightfully chosen people based on the color of their skin. Like, that's stupid. Like, that's a very stupid position. And that's the ethos that has taken over an entire people. It's very dumb. And we could simply not. Like, we could do what China is doing. Can you imagine what would be happening if after World War II, America said to the rest of the world, hey, we're going to negotiate with you guys and try to create win-win scenarios where we get access to your resources and you get to develop your country based on the profits that come out of those arrangements. And we'll even give you loans, and if it doesn't work out, then we'll just forgive those loans, and we'll help you build infrastructure and roads. Like, can you imagine if America post-World War II went through Africa, and instead of cooing governments and trying to do all this kind of stuff, actually just said, hey, let's build your infrastructure up so we can get access to those mines and those resources and all that kind of stuff. Let's develop your country, right? Let's let you have access to the profits that come out of that, and so that you can use those profits in order to build up your society and do that. Can you imagine how different the world would look? Right? But instead of that, America basically just kicks in the door, destroys everything, takes your children, throws them into mines. That's what Elon Musk did. That's what he does. How do you think he gets his cobalt? Like, it's madness. Adam says, I'd say since the assassination of JFK, and even then he was just getting in the way. Yeah. Watch the Oliver Stone doc on JFK. It's what he was planning. Yeah, not a single bone in them will do this. Yeah, I think that's actually right. And it's just a kind of hysterical madness. It's just a hysterical madness that just says we have to dominate. We have to control. We have to destroy. We can't not. We can't not. That the world sees the American empire no differently than the way we see the Nazis. I think that's the hard, cold reality that capitalist apologists truly do not want to accept. That they can't accept that. That people like Destiny, Vosh, right? Your apologists for capitalism who claim to be progressive voices, right? They simply cannot accept the truth that the entire rest of the world views America the same way we view the Nazis. And that when they look at the American flag, they see no difference between it and the Nazi flag. That is fundamentally true. And they will never be able to accept that. Because to accept that simple reality, that we are the Nazis on the world stage, and we operate exactly in the same way, with exactly the same ethos, I mean, that's going to break a person. That's going to take an entire... you can't accept it and maintain a capitalist apologism. You simply can't. The two are so contrary to one another. And that's what leads us into this hyper-delusionism. This just place of total delusion. Because if the choice... And you can see this on the individual level. How many times do I say this? It's the hardest thing for a person to do is deal with themselves. There's nothing harder. People are willing to do all kinds of crazy things. All kinds of crazy things. And I actually think there are a lot of people who are in favor of selling themselves into slavery, because at least that means they don't need to deal with themselves. At least they can just erect this other person and pretend as though they live in this system and this structure that's benefiting them somehow. Because to do otherwise is to actually focus on oneself, which is far more difficult. Far more difficult. And so they would prefer to spend their entire day grinding away at a worthless pursuit that inevitably betrays them, because it's easier. And I think the same is true of nations. That fundamentally what America must do, what it must do for its own survival, is focus on itself and focus on what it needs to do. And it's doing exactly the opposite. You see it all the way through the southern states now. How hard the southern states are fighting to remove what they call CRT from the conversation. But really it's just an excuse to ensure that children never learn the history of America. Ensure that children never learn the history of American imperialism. That to ensure that children are indoctrinated into the death cult and are convinced that capitalism and the white supremacist nation of America are the greatest power in the world. To ensure that this mass delusion is maintained. And to continue externalizing evil, creating boogeymen, pretending as though destroying nations and stealing their resources is actually good because you're quote unquote spreading democracy, right? And all of it is being done because to actually stop doing any of that and focusing on the self, focusing on the national interest, focusing on the what is our national narrative and is it cohesive and does it make sense, is actually hard work and is actually difficult to do and requires humility, forgiveness, apology. Do you think people like Peterson, do you think people like Shapiro, do you think people like Matt Walsh are interested in humility? Do you think they're interested in forgiveness? Do you think that they're going to call their people to be humble and considerate of themselves? Do you think they're actually going to say, love your neighbor as yourself, as they clutch their Bible to their chest? Do you think they're actually going to say, give your money to the poor? Do you think they're actually going to say, we have to consider our own actions before we consider the actions of others? Do you think they're actually going to say these things? No, never. Never. And these are the cultural leaders in America. Right? It's why people like Andrew Tate seize hold. Like, if somebody can create a counter narrative for me that makes any sense, if someone can point something out to me that makes any sense, I'd really like them to. Because what we're doing is total madness. Like, a madness beyond madness. Like you at least, like the greatest evil villains that exist in our narratives. Darth Vader, the Emperor, Emperor Palpatine, Voldemort, Sauron, Satan. At least these guys were attempting to build something for themselves. At least these guys were, while they were interested in domination, subjugation, and destruction, they weren't so crazy as to believe that they should also destroy themselves. And that's exactly what we believe. That's exactly what we believe. Every single time someone says the society doesn't owe you anything, that is what they are saying. Anytime somebody says get a job, that is what they are saying. That we should not only subjugate and dominate and destroy everything around us, including the ecosystem, but that we should also destroy ourselves. Oh yes, I thought you'd like that one, Generation Y Me. For those who are just listening, I just put up a headline. Exclusive. U.S. considers China sanctions to deter Taiwan action. Taiwan presses EU. Yeah, because sanctioning China will work. Like, talk about the biggest possible backfire that you could possibly put out there. Where's all our stuff come from, guys? Where's all our stuff come from? I dare you. If you're not watching, you should, right now. Okay? I just put up the U.S.-China trade war, how China overtook the U.S. as the world's major trading partner, starting from 1980, moving on year by year. Uh, uh, blue shows you who is the larger trading partner. Blue is the US. And as it moves more towards the right, that's red, that's China. Just watch how this goes. You tell me, who loses if the United States sanctions China? Who loses? You tell me. Who loses? If you're just watching at home, or if you're just listening, right? From 1980 to the current day, the map shifts from being almost completely blue to being almost completely red. As of 2018, which is 4 years ago, so it's advanced even further, the only countries that still have the United States as a major trading partner: Canada, Mexico, Venezuela, Ecuador, with some trade happening, UK of course, with some trade happening in France and sections of Africa. So that means that most of the rest of the world, and of course this map is old, right? So Venezuela actually shifted to America very recently. India has recently shifted to, Venezuela shifted to China recently. So who loses? Who loses if they sanction Taiwan? If they sanction China, rather? Who loses? Do you think it's China? I don't. If all you do is sanction everybody, you're the isolated one. If all you do is say, I'm going to take my ball and go home, then they're going to find another ball. And guess who's not playing the game? I wonder if I can find an even more recent map than this one. Recent map than this one. I'd be very curious about that. This is a list. That's nice. Let me see. Yeah, here you go. That's exactly what I want. Nah, come on. Like, if America does it, they are just signaling to the rest of the world how absolutely deluded they've become. Right? If you don't believe it now, if they do that, it'll be a complete disaster. All right, this is something else. It'll be a total disaster for America. Yep. Oh no, they learned nothing from sanctioning Russia, I guess. It's all part of some awful plan. There's no plan, dude. Like, it really is just like, if all you've got is a hammer, everything is a nail. All they have is military action and sanctioning. They have no diplomatic plan. They have no diplomacy, right? Like, this is why they're failing so bad against the Russians right now, is because they have no idea who the Russians are. They have no idea who Putin is. Like, seriously, at the highest levels of decision making, Putin is just some crazed lunatic. You can't plan a successful strategy if all you're going to say is that Putin is a nut job, crazy lunatic. Oh my God. Because it's not a rational position. It's not something that can be taken seriously. And how do you hope to negotiate with someone who you consider like that? Because at the end of the day, they're not negotiating. Right? The capitalists aren't negotiating. And yet we think that we should negotiate with them. It's crazy. Like, it's crazy. And if they actually move forward, yeah, and the US is still a top purchaser of Russian oil, buying it from India, fake sanctions, yeah. Fake sanctions, kinda. Yeah. Oh, look, the capitalists found out to insert a middleman. Right? Like, capitalists have been inserting middlemen, worthless middlemen, into the middle of things for hundreds and hundreds of years. Like, inserting worthless middlemen into the process is how capitalists make money. Right? Take a process, insert a worthless middleman into the middle of it, siphon money away. That's what all the privatization is about. Like, that's what it is that you're trying to insert yourself as a worthless middleman into the middle of a process that should be a state function, should be a utility. Like, can you imagine if they do it? Like, I genuinely lost faith in America's ability to be rational in the world with how they handled Ukraine. Like, I never believed that they would actually allow Russia to invade Ukraine, because I always knew it would be a disaster for America and the West. It can't be anything other than that. And so I just never thought they would be so stupid. And yet, here we are. Well, people do support Ukraine in rhetoric, right? People will fly their little stupid flag, right? Say Slava Ukraine, right? You'll have, idiots like Destiny and Vosh and Adam Azoff and whatever, or Azov something or whatever his name is, and they'll like offer support theoretically, but nobody's like sending troops, right? Like, nobody's actually like, because they know what they're doing there. Like, they know what they're doing there. That what they're doing there is they're destroying Ukraine. They're ensuring that Ukraine gets blown up so that they can break it apart and purchase sections of it. Like, what you're actually seeing in Ukraine, like, it doesn't make sense in terms of nationalism. Like, when you're living in a world of nations, what's happening there doesn't make sense. But it makes sense once you realize that the true power centers are capitalists, the oligarchies, right? That they live in a different country that doesn't actually exist, but it's called Richistan, right? And what they want is they want the land in Ukraine, because the land in Ukraine is some of the most, is some of the strongest agricultural land in the world. And so what they're doing is they're blowing the place up and tearing it to pieces so that they can buy that land for themselves. And so the land is no longer part of the Ukrainian nation, it's now part of Richistan. And they don't care if they have to murder a bunch of Ukrainians and Russians to do it. Like, that's the only narrative that makes sense. That if the narrative is about Ukraine, is about American security, or about the security of Europe, it's madness. That if it's about making life easier for Ukraine, for Europeans, it's insane. The only narrative that makes the actions of the United States and Europe, of NATO, make any sense whatsoever is that the private interests, the oligarchs that actually own these systems, want Ukraine to be destroyed and fractured and blown apart so that they can buy it up. And possibly deindustrialization of Germany. Dude, the blowback that's going to happen in places like Germany is going to be incredible. Like, these capitalists don't actually understand the game they're playing. Like, they arrogantly believe that the populace has been subdued. When what is actually happening is that the populace has their fingers crossed, hoping there's a peaceful way out of it. That's what's happening. Like, fascist movements have come out of Germany. The Nazis were defeated, but the fascists didn't go away. They didn't just float into the ether and evaporate. That they exist throughout Europe. How many cold winters do you think the German citizens will experience before fascism starts to look appealing once again? How many cold winters do you think the people of the UK are going to experience? How many cold winters do you think the people in the UK are going to experience before they foment a legitimate revolution? A Sri Lankan style revolt? How long do you think the citizens of Europe are going to tolerate this ruthless incompetence from their leadership? I don't think it's going to be very long. Like, things are going to happen swiftly. And it's all being done, near as I can tell, so that people like Bill Gates, people like Bezos, right? Organizations like BlackRock can get access to farmland. Because the response of the oligarchy in regards to the crisis they're creating, climate change, is hysterical, is total hysteria. They're trying to seize as many basic resources as they can get their hands on, in the hopes that they will be able to survive the apocalypse that they themselves are creating. Those who play in a rigged game get stupid. And it is very stupid. It's very, very stupid what's happening. Very, very stupid what's happening. All right, guys, we've reached the end of this one. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. The billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.